Okay. Yep. Cool. Yeah. So, welcome. I don't even remember. I think I did teach your class, or did I not? I might not have been teaching you. Okay, okay.
I mean,
Cool.
The Czech classes also changed a lot. You might have been teaching some JavaScript in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then it's only Isaac who's left over from that.
So my name is Saki. It's nice to meet you. We'll be running the final class, and I'll be doing the class together with Daniel and together with Emil. And Marty will be joining you for some of the following classes, and I think Jacob will be joining as well.
Possibly Eunice.
And possibly Eunice as well. So you will have like a big assortment of different mentors. I won't be here next week though. But the title of the project that we're going to be doing is the music of Africa, as you might have worked out by now. And this is my favorite African artist. I don't know if anyone knows who it is. No, you don't. That's disappointing. That's Fela Kuti. You know him?
I've had the name, but I don't know.
Okay. So I think maybe Christopher, do you want to tell a little bit about the background of the project and like just
Yeah, sure.
the big headlines of what we'll be doing?
So it's a bit of a special project this time because it's a real world project. So it's something where we're collaborating with someone outside of Hack the Future who needed something, and we started talking with them and said, okay, hey, that sounds quite interesting. We would like to do that for you. And the good thing is that they don't have any money and they don't have any deadlines. So they're just happy to have it at all. So there's not that much pressure on us, but of course it would be really nice if we can build a functioning project because it will actually be used. So that external partner is a university in Germany, the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz. So they have, I think, Europe's largest archive of African music, a collection of the original vinyls and VHS and cassette tapes and even VHS tapes of African music from every single country in Africa from the years 1940 until the present day. So there's a lot of really, really rare music there, some music that is completely lost. You can't really find it anymore. It's not on the internet yet. So I mean, just imagine some like Kenyan music from 1940. It's just very difficult to find, and they have a little bit of an archive. So quite cool, and they use it mostly for research on like African music culture, and they have a focus in their department at that university. And they recently also started digitalizing everything. So now, of course, they want to have an online database where you can actually search it. That makes it easier to collaborate with other researchers around the world, but also make the music available to people who just want to listen to it or who want to maybe commercially use it or make new music with it, sample it. So they got in touch with one of our mentors, Rasmus. I don't know if any of you met him. He's a data scientist that he's doing his PhD right now, so he lives in Tokyo at the moment. But he kind of initiated the project from over there, and he'll be back from August. So maybe he'll see some at the very end of the project. I think he'd be quite happy about it. Yes, so it's maybe. Should we show a small video from what the archive looks like? It's a report, like a documentary in German, so I guess most of it are looking at the pictures, but I think I'm the only one here who speaks German, I think. Or, you know a little bit of German? You say some German words every now and then?
I understand German.
Yeah. Can you throw up not throw up, but you know, in the description of the African Music Project channel, there is a link.
Okay.
It's just like I can also send it to you.
Yeah.
Let's use this one for instance.
In the description of
I
the
just
in
sent
the
you
channel.
I sent you the YouTube.
Okay. Is there some audio here? Oh, wait. It's trying to play through the TV. I see. I'm not. So maybe we should just turn it up. But now I changed the output to my computer. I think it should be enough.
Well, then.
We'll see.
Das Archiv für die Musik Afrikas hat die unterschiedlichsten Aufgaben und Möglichkeiten. Wir sammeln, konservieren, digitalisieren unterschiedlichste Tonträger. Wir forschen in verschiedenen Ländern Afrikas zu Musik, verschiedenen Musikstilen, der Rolle des Musikers in der Gesellschaft oder auch in Deutschland zum Beispiel zu Afrika-Musikfestivals.
Was afrikanische Musik für mich bedeutet, ist in erster Linie, dass es meinen musikalischen Horizont erweitert. Und darüber hinaus ist afrikanische Musik und Musik im Allgemeinen auch immer eine Möglichkeit, sich Zugang zu wissenschaftlichen Themen zu erarbeiten.
Als Musikerin bin ich extrem interessiert in jede Art von Musik und hatte noch nicht viel mit afrikanischer Musik zu tun und bin sehr glücklich, neue Welten von Musik zu finden.
Das AMA ist dem Namen nach ein Archiv,
Oder?
zugleich ist es aber auch ein Ort gelebter sozialer Praxis.
See what the place looks like and what they're talking about is just like why are they interested in the music and like what are they doing at that department over there. So you know like it is a physical space as well, and they have all these physical records, vinyls, cassette tapes, everything. So and then there are 2 research assistants that work at that music archive. They're quite young, and those are 2 people who are in our Slack channel as well now, and that are like working a little bit with us. So they want to mostly help us build this platform, and they can tell us what exactly they need. And but they don't have big expectations for it either. So it's like, of course, we want to build the best possible thing either, but they're not gonna promise us. So what else to say about that? I mean, I think maybe then we should dive into directly like what it should be able to do, or is that already taking away?
Well, I have a project agenda, so I think
Okay.
that's enough. So this is a plan for the day. First, we're going to talk about the working agreement. So we'll be like discussing how we're going to work together and try to make some sort of arrangements so we kind of like can trust that we work together in the same way and we have the same goals. And I guess that's kind of a little bit a part of the process for the project. But then we'll be talking a little bit about like the overall process. We'll be introducing you to a little bit of project management tools. Just like the gist of it, we're not going to go into a ton of detail, but we try to give you enough tools that you have what we think you will need. Then under the section inspiration for tools, that's more like technical tools that you might be using in the project. So we're going to show you some tools that we've been discussing as mentors that would be really cool to integrate in the project. And finally, I have a point which is called research spikes. So something new that we want to introduce for this project is that each of you is going to do some individual work upfront. And we kind of like broken that into some research spikes. So we kind of like identified some things that we wanted to research. And some of it has to do with those tools that we are bringing on the table. So it's kind of like we ask you to, during the first week, we ask you to go home and build a prototype of something individually, and then you come back and we kind of like evaluate and figure out is this something that we can realistically work with in the project? So that's the plan for today, and I have a feeling that it might actually be a little bit ambitious, but we'll try to get to it. So yeah. I don't know, maybe first, anyone heard about working agreements before? No? Okay. So I basically just copy-pasted the first definition I couldn't find on Google, but I think it looked pretty alright. So a working agreement is a guideline that defines how groups want to work together and what they want in the working environment, and from each other to feel safe and free to learn, explore, and discover. Yeah, so there are definitely some things that I expect you to be doing in terms of the way that you work together. But it would be really nice to maybe take a quick round and see what kind of input you have. So maybe if you can like just spread out the post-its and then write 3 post-it each. And what you need to write is come up with some ideas in terms of what would be good to have kind of like arrangements for working together. So it could be like having a plan for what to do if you are absent for class, and you remember you're working in a team now, right? So maybe your teammates need to know something about that. That could be one thing. Another thing is how you share the code. Another thing could be like there's a ton of different things. So try to write down 3 different things, and then we'll see if we end up at the same thing. Can I have some of that? Yeah. And I don't know if I'm the only one here who doesn't have a pen. Yeah. You have an extra book. So right now it's 12:30, so we have 5 minutes for doing this. 12:35. And if everyone is finished in 2 minutes, we'll do it in 2 minutes. But
what are we writing?
can you, what did you understand?
I missed the part.
Oh, you did actually? Okay, you're not. Okay. Okay, so rules in terms of working together. Ideas for rules in terms of working together to improve the collaboration. And if you have more than 3 ideas, you're more than welcome. Daniel, can you do the minutes just like what we agree on?
The minutes?
Yeah, just meeting minutes. That's when you do like the summary.
Oh, I pray for that.
Yep.
So you say
So just be ready to do the summary of what we find out.
okay, follow from your lead. You want me to do the
Yeah, just
from the lead?
so we're doing the working agreement now, right? And I just wanted to write down what we agree on.
Yeah.
So
I have it.
oh, I had a slide more. Or maybe it's supposed to go like that. Actually, not sure. Yeah, I need more post-its. Cool. Everyone ready? Great. So maybe we do the table around, but end with the 3 of us. So Isaac, can you start off? And I think we're going to put them, I guess. Yeah.
Number one is meet up with a partner if it is possible.
Sorry?
Meeting up with a group partner if it is possible. Maybe more than
So
once.
meeting physically with the
Yeah,
group?
physically, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea.
Then using tools like GitHub to share and track code. Then frequent communication between group partners.
Sounds great. It would be great if you put them on 3 different post-its, but I guess we'll be alright.
Okay, just frequent.
Is that communication?
But you don't have to do a summary of that yet. I think we'll just do it. So, whoops. Cool. Joe?
First is to maintain frequent communication on Slack and GitHub with your team members. Second is careful estimation of tasks to determine time requirements. And third is staying within the scope of given tasks.
Okay, cool. Yep, Emil?
I have a lot of the same ones. I have one thing I think.
So maybe if we have some that overlap, let's try to map them when they go on the wall.
This one says share code frequently, or share progress frequently. So maybe use pull requests on GitHub, and I've written even small changes and work in progress, so people can see what you do. And then I've said also review each other's code constructively, figure out what are the learnings, and also if the solution is sufficient. And then I'm also going to just make a to-do list and agree on priority and scope. So,
Yeah, maybe Joel, you can be the master of mapping things on top of each other then. Yeah. So Darren.
Yeah. So I wrote in that maybe you can create in GitHub account for both, so both can pull and get or push code into it.
Definitely, yeah.
And when you're at home, so you can speak on Skype and share the code with the plugin and VS Code, so you can share the screen, so we can see what you can.
Is that like both people have their things going on in VS Code?
Yeah, like I share my screen so he can see my code, and then he also do.
And he can also type in your code.
I think
You can use Team.
Yeah, okay. I just know for some editors there are like plugins where you don't share the screen. It's just that the other person kind of shows up in your code editor, and then you're working on the same code. That's actually really cool for working remote.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, let's not start discussing about that. But that's a great tool. That's something that could be used. But we need to discuss when to do that or not. So.
And maybe using Trello to like say that I wrote that you can you do the part, and then when he download the part, so he can delete that. So
cool.
Like
Great idea. So I think Trello is like something with the to-do list, right?
Yeah.
And there's I think the GitHub part maybe maps to using pull requests. Yeah. Okay, cool. What was your name? Okay. Can you tell us what you've written on?
Yes, the first is say that we could work in the Scrum platform, so it could be Trello. So we can like firstly is like a plan what we're going to plan, then we distribute it into different persons, and we create some columns like it's either develop or either test. So when you finish it, you can drag to the either develop, and then some people, maybe our members, can drag to the test. And the second, I think we need to at least one time face-to-face meeting for every week, so we can like face-to-face to talk about each other's problems or what we're going to do.
And outside of class, right?
Yeah. Yes, maybe. And the three is that I don't know if my understanding correctly, but the first like we kind of different persons have different responsibilities and that. But it's for one project, right?
Yeah. So you'll probably be most likely be 2 people in each team. So I think the different people will have quite a few responsibilities, but you can discuss having someone being the champion of something. But also on the other hand, we want people not to delegate too much responsibility, because we've seen that can be a problem if one person knows nothing about some part of the project. But we can go into more depth discussing that later as well.
So I was thinking if it's 2 persons, but we can still learn how to use GitHub branch. Then we can work in the branch firstly, and then maybe our mentor said it's okay to merge to the masters. And the 4 is that I do think we need code preview, so we make our code more constructive and efficient.
I'm trying to just create single one for virtual.com.
Cool. Hershey?
First, we should arrange a meeting with to have an initial requirement to get the requirements or to start mock-up.
Yep.
And then we have to adopt agile or Scrum form to develop our project and collaborate within the team we use GitHub or GitLab, and and every team member must get familiar with the GitLab in order to share the code. And third is during the whole process, we should organize frequent meetings to update and also help each other. If one developer is not more efficient or is lacking something, so we have to help each other within a team. And also we must respect the deadlines because it's very important to keep in mind as we develop.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent points as well. Do you have some experience with Scrum?
Yes, I have used it before.
Cool. Yeah, we probably won't be doing everything in Scrum, but the things that we take from project management will be Scrum concepts, and we'll try to put them into this concept and just teach you those kind of isolated things. And but I don't think we can really within this course kind of like do a proper Scrum because it takes a lot of practice and we don't have so much time and we don't have the time to teach you either. But we try to do it as best as we can. Cool. Ismail?
You got a shitty job, Joe.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm trying to.
I don't know who invented post-its that doesn't stick. That doesn't make sense.
I think we need a.
So there was a guy who invented post-its that can stick on a wall, and then there was the guy who invented post-its that doesn't stick on a wall.
It's the wall's fault.
Yeah. Maybe we should actually have done it on the television because I think they might stick better in here.
Yeah. But do we need the TV more later?
Well, I don't think it will leave so much residue, so we can just remove them. It's just like, well, now we're doing this. We're almost through. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Ismail?
Yeah, we should like share the code as they said within the GitHub.
Yeah.
And each pattern like able to can write or add or like see the code. And also the group must be updated every week or every day that their agreement, how they are updated. And yeah, share the code also like if you are alone or a group doesn't know how to like interpret the code, it's best way to share in Slack and you can get answered quick. Only these three.
Cool. I'm very impressed by all of your contributions because I feel like a lot of the stuff that I wanted to make sure here that's already out there, so that's really great. I wrote a little more than 3 of them because I've been running this project a few times, so I kind of know what kind of problems we tend to run into. I wrote GitHub pull request for everything. That should be pretty obvious. But that's something I'm actually a little surprised that so many of you mentioned that. So you have been committing your homework with GitHub pull requests? Excellent, great, because the last class they didn't have so much experience doing that. So that was something we struggled with. Another thing here is about Slack channels. So always make sure to ask for help in the Slack channel first. Like we'll create a channel for this project specifically, or maybe it's just the Class 4 channel. Yeah, I guess it's just the Class 4 channel, right? Yeah. So just make sure to post in the channel first because every project I've seen, there's always someone who's like posting directly to me or to Jacob or something like that, depending on who they think knows a lot about this. But I might be like at work in meetings or something like that. It might take me like 6 hours to get back to you, or maybe it might take me like 3 days. You won't know. So if you put it in the channel, if I see it first, I'll respond. If Jacob sees it and he has time, he'll respond. If you see it, whoever has the time first will make sure to respond. And it might even be that one of the other students might be able to respond to that question. Another thing that we haven't actually been doing for the last project, but we did it for Jawad's class, was that it's probably a good idea if you create a Slack channel specifically for your project, so you can keep all the communication with your team member in there, and you can invite the mentors as well, so we can like follow along, and then you can just, if there's something relevant you want to ask us about, you can tag us. Yeah. But then again, the question is, most of the time we want to have the questions in the main channel, so I'm not sure about that. Maybe that's something we can discuss a little further detail. But the main point here was always ask in the project channel first. And then I have one which is actually a question, so that's something we need to work a little bit more on. But I wrote the question, what to do when you're stuck. So that goes a little bit along with that one. That's definitely something you want to do, but maybe there's some other things you can do. So that's maybe something we can just discuss a little more detail. What else you can do whenever you get stuck. Then I want to make sure to talk about commitments, and that's something we've been doing with all of the classes, is that we do kind of like around the table and ask you to be very, very honest about how much time per week you can assign to this project, because then we try to group you up with a partner who has approximately the same amount of time, so it's not like there's one person doing 60 hours a week and another person doing 5 hours a week, because that will never work. So that's something you have to be very honest about. And I know that we are saying a certain number that we expect you to be doing per week and things like that. But nobody's going to come and knock you in the head if you say you can only work 5 hours a week, if that's only the truth. The reason we need this is just to make sure we partner you up with someone who can make approximately the same contribution, because otherwise, it will create a lot of problems for you further down the line. So that's a commitment part. Then I wrote, make sure to check your Slack at least daily. I don't necessarily expect you to respond to everything that's going on Slack, but at least check it and read through what's going on at least daily. So if you have not already, make sure to install Slack on your cell phones. That really helps in making sure that you keep up to date. Of course, maybe it doesn't work for you, but then find another way that you can make sure to check Slack at least daily. I mean, I check Slack 50 times a day or something like that, maybe. But that's because I use it for regular work as well. And I understand if you if you have some other work that has nothing to do with Hack Your Future during the day, it might not be so easy to check it quite so often. But make sure to check it at least daily. I think that should be pretty realistic for everyone. And then transparency, but that's kind of like, I wrote transparency and then I wrote everything goes on GitHub. So we all are talking a lot about GitHub, but I think it's really, really important also, like, you mentioned committing stuff that's work in progress. So don't wait until your stuff is finished and then push it to GitHub. Just push it to GitHub as often as you possibly can, because it makes it so much easier for us. If you're stuck with something, you can just say, oh yeah, so I just pushed it to a branch on GitHub. You can go and look at it there, because if you just take a snippet of code and throw it on Slack and ask us for help, we have very little chance to know what's actually going wrong without seeing the bigger context. So if you just get used to pushing everything to GitHub, it makes everything a lot easier. Yeah. Christopher?
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff. I mean, Slack daily and also GitHub. I mean, a lot of work will be done on GitHub, so I think that's always
that's a really good point. Make sure to check your GitHub as well if you have like a pull request pending, or go and check if your teammate has a pull request where they need some review or something like that. So check GitHub daily as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that's also like maybe a good look. Like I pulled up an example of myself where it doesn't really look too impressive, the amount that I've worked with GitHub. Or let's zoom in a bit here. So you know, it should look a lot better for you throughout the project. I mean, it'll be 6 weeks, so there'll be a little bit, and it should fill up nicely and green. Like I could pull up some positive examples, but I don't want to like single any students from other classes out. So that's definitely a good look. And I know that Slack can sometimes go dead for a couple of days. There's not that much going on, but on GitHub, you know, like we can also see how much you've been working on there. So it's definitely always a good.
That's a really good point. I mean, like halfway through the last project, I kind of pulled out GitHub and showed that like literally nobody were contributing anything to GitHub. I don't think like most of the students had realized that we can actually see everything in GitHub. So we can see who is contributing, who is not contributing. It's not like we're going to like go and knock you in the head because of that. And it could be that you're just doing a lot of work on your local computer but please push that to Git so we can see it, so we can help you out sooner. And that also makes it easier for us to, just generally to help you sooner. And a little point here is this graph that you see there shows how often you contribute to GitHub. Just putting a comment on a pull request will actually give you a contribution. So that's kind of a little star in there. And that's something that employers can see as well, because all of this is open source. So if they see that you have like a little bit of contributions every single day, that's pretty good.
Can you go on GitHub and really quickly show that, just so we have it in the video as well and make it a bit more visual for people here? Like, pull up like the, let's say, the profile of yourself, for instance, and then look at it from the eyes of an employer.
So this is my contributions on GitHub. So you can see I have like days where I'm not contributing. Maybe I was on a holiday, or maybe I was doing something really secret on my own computer or something like that. But I have like pretty consistently, I have code contributed on most days. So I don't know, is there anyone else who want their GitHub profile showcased here?
Or, I mean, maybe we'll...
You want to see Jason Miller's profile, maybe? The guy in the
Yeah.
His GitHub handle is developer.
Do you know his GitHub handle by...
Develop it, DEVELOPIT.
Like that?
Yeah.
Right.
It's only 2,000 contributions.
Yeah.
He's contributing every day.
So, so yeah, basically everything that you're doing here on GitHub is transparent, and I know that can be a little bit scary because of course you're going to do some shitty work, but I mean like everyone does that in the beginning, so it's more important that the stuff that ends up being in the repository actually looks quite nice, and that's what we're here for, to help you make sure that you end up with something that.
Can you go into one of the repositories and just then look at it like what you would be looking at, for instance, or like the commit history from the stock room?
Yeah, I mean we could go into Preact, and then we can just basically look at the commit history here. And here we can see like all the stuff that's going on, but I think maybe this is like just broken down to commit level, so it can be really confusing. So what I would usually do is I would usually go and have a look at the pull requests. That are also something that is really nice to know if you're going to use a library developed by someone else. Go to the GitHub and have a look at the issues. If there's like a ton of issues and a lot of them are really old, that might be a problem, because then you might be like starting to use a library that's not being maintained anymore. I know Preact is a very popular library, so it's pretty reasonable that they have quite a lot of issues, but maybe let's have a look and see how old those issues get to be.
Oh, they're closed pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I hope they do. So here's actually something from December 2017, but then you probably want to dive into it and have a look and figure out if it's actually something that's a major priority, or but this is not really a class on trying to vet open source libraries, but that's something to think about. So quite often I would go in here and I would have a look at what kind of pull requests are there in here, and maybe also what are the closed pull requests, because that kind of shows the process as well. So you can see this one is kind of boring because nobody rejected it or anything like that. It was just approved on the first go. Yeah, I don't know if they're not so critical or it's just like really good developers who do it right the first time. You will definitely see that most junior developers have like usually a really long trail of comments where it's like the lead saying, hey, you need to fix this, okay, I'll fix that, and then I fix it, you need to fix this, okay, I have to do that, and then it just goes on forever. That's pretty common if you're a junior developer, but then if you see like the more senior developers, they usually, most of the time, they can work it out right away. But sometimes it's not like that.
if you want to show something similar to that, where they have pull conversations about a pull request before merging it, you could probably pull up Cypress. Cypress has a very good commit history and their,
but let's not use so much time on that now.
I mean, yeah, the point of it is more like you can see very immediately what everyone has been doing, and I think that's very important for you to like consider, because that will also be future employers that will be like, if this is your only project that you have on your GitHub, they will go in very specifically and look at what have you actually done on this project, and then as Zaki showcased, you can go into quite a lot of detail of like what kind of changes were made and when and how many, and like how much have other people been doing on the project, because probably Zaki and some other mentors will also make small commits to your project, but they will definitely make sure that they're not building anything for you. So
maybe we are building some components, but then
Yeah.
will it be like a specific component? But it's also quite important that a future employer then can see that you didn't actually build that component, because then the question is, are they going to ask you in deep detail what that was? You definitely shouldn't claim that you built something that you didn't build. So you can say that actually it was like one of our mentors who provided that. But then you can like use it as an opportunity and then try to study the stuff that we give you. We definitely expect you to know to some extent all the code that goes into your repo. But then you can like tell them what you know about that code that we gave you. Yeah. But I think we're heading a little bit down of a...
I think I wanted to make a big point out of that, just like the constant communication, because I think I was a bit, frankly, annoyed with like how little communication there is on Slack. Like I made a post and asked like, hey, is everyone ready for the final project? And this morning, I wasn't really sure who's all going to come. So I think, I mean, that of course concerns the people who aren't here today, and like not so much you, but it's tough to plan for us if we think, okay, there might be 10 people. Should we move to another room, or will it be 6 people? Like, how many teams can we make? Who can do what in the project? So it's like I expect that everyone is on Slack and lets me and everyone else know like what is the status of the project, and we can do that on GitHub too. So it's like somewhere there should be some trace of what you're doing somewhere. And I mean, all the other points that I had are kind of on the wall. I just wrote it more like specific cases. Like, I would like my teammates to make at least 5 significant commits every week so that I can also follow their progress. You know, like, so all their teammates are able to follow what you are doing if you're not communicating all the time. Or
it can be a little bit difficult to set a number on commits, but definitely have some idea about how much you're contributing. Because you could take like one tiny thing and break it into 5 commits, or you could build something really, really big and then just have it in 1 commit. So.
But I mean, that could be a problem. Like when in the last class, someone did one huge commit on like Saturday night, and that was 1,000 lines of code. Yeah. No one has a chance to look at that before Sunday. So I think that's why I wrote 5. So it's like every work day of the week, you make a little commit, and then everyone can follow along. But it doesn't have to be 5.
Yeah. But that's something you can put into the working agreement as well. That is an idea about how much should be in a commit. Mm-hmm. So usually when I have a pull request, I've broken it into quite a lot of commits. Usually for separate files, they have separate commits, unless it's like I change the name of something. Then of course I want to have all the files where I change the name in the same commit. But I usually break it down into a lot of commits. Mm-hmm.
Another point was, you know, if you cannot attend one of the Sundays or one of the classes, like, I mean, we will continue meeting on Sundays, but I think it's also quite open that you meet with your team partner during the week. I think it's not really a problem. I think all of you except Isaac live relatively close to Copenhagen, right? Or how long does it take you to travel to Copenhagen?
No.
On average, like over 1 hour? Half an hour?
That's nothing.
It's not like you live by Østerbro now, so okay. Rashid? It's Rashid, right? Not Rashid. Okay.
Not far away.
It's because the last name is Majid. Then you always okay. Not too far away. Okay. So I think Isaac, like with you, we need to plan a bit more. If we do like a meeting that's not during the week, it's maybe more difficult. But otherwise, we have some spaces available during the week where you just need to. Either let me know if you want to come here to study, for instance. We can always find a room here at KPH during the week. That should be really easy. And then there's also that Google Success Center that at least have promised us that we can use that space very frequently, but I'm still figuring out like how the booking works. It's not super reliable. I'm learning that the hard way right now with that hardware to browser workshop, but that's a different story.
But I know some of the classes have been meeting, for instance, at the Black Diamond and the library, and there's like a ton of different study places around.
Exactly.
So there should be other options as well.
So, but the point I want to make is that you have to take a bit of your own responsibility for that. So it's just like figure that out with your team partner and don't necessarily wait for us to set something up, because we will only take care of the Sunday classes, but then we expect on the Sundays that everyone has been working together. So saying that, it wasn't possible or there wasn't a chance to meet up, okay, well, it doesn't make sense. I'll skip that part. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Should we take a really short break, just 5 minutes?
We need to do the rest of the round, and I just got another idea here, so.
Okay.
Do you want us to say something?
Yeah, I have one to say yes.
Yeah. So could we give the attention to Daniel, please?
Okay, I'm not going to bring anything new, so communicate with your team and teammate. So the idea is that we've been talking here about the meetings outside of Active Future. Is one way of doing it using the Slack channel. Share knowledge with your teammates, so using the tools that we've been talking about. The GitHub is not just about sharing the knowledge, it's also about keeping a track of the development as well. And split and agree the workload. So on the meetings you should agree upon what you're gonna do, and we've talked a little bit about the respecting the deadlines, respecting the commitment with your partner. That's one of the things that we saw on the other groups, that things slided a little bit because of the communication, and then the agreements were not being kept. So it's really good to, if you have some questions, put it on Slack, communicate with your partner, and reach to us, so we can prevent that the group suffers. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. I added 2 more just now. So we briefly touched upon that one. I call this one delegation versus non-delegation. So the idea is, obviously you need to delegate some work, otherwise it doesn't make sense to be in a group. So it doesn't make sense to be in a group if both of you are doing all the work, right? But we had some examples where we had like one person do the back end, another one doing the front end. And then they realized that they couldn't integrate it together, and they were completely stuck because they had no overlap in terms of what they knew about that. That's a really, really big problem. We want to avoid that. So you need to figure out in your group some way to know everything that's going on while not actually being 2 people building the same thing. And I think it really key is just to make sure that you review each other's code. So it hooks back into pull requests, but it's also something that you need to talk about in the groups. So I think the working agreement we're doing here today is for the class in general, but then I would suggest that you sit down as a group and try to do some more detailed working agreements where you try to figure out how to address things like that. Then I have something here which is kind of an idea, and I'm planning to enforce it for this week, but it's something that you can think about doing for the weeks after. Again, this is something you probably can discuss in the groups individually, but the idea here is to try to keep the hand-in of something new on Saturdays at 12 o'clock, because that means that us mentors have a chance to see it before we meet on Sundays. I know probably a lot of your work will take place during the weekend, so it can be a little tricky, but that's something you can try to think about. Maybe you can plan it like that, because I think it would be really valuable for you to come here at class having given us mentors a chance to see your code before class, because during class we really don't have a lot of time to read through it line by line. But if you can push it to GitHub and you can tell us like 12 hours before or something like that, we would have the time to skim through it and have an idea what your code is actually doing, and then we can give you a lot more qualified feedback. So that's definitely something to think about. So I think we're going to take a break now, and then when we return, we try to make some statements that we put into a working agreement. We'll probably have to select something and not everything, but my idea is then that you can take some of it and put it into your like individual group working agreement afterwards. But we definitely need to have some overall guidelines for the class as a whole. So this one goes together with reviews, and this one does as well actually. So it's just more nuances to that. Yeah. Cool. So what's the time right now?
1:10, so 1:15.
Yeah. Okay. 5 minutes.
So we'll pause the
And
recording so it gets my size smaller.
We'll get you started again. So. And we lose out on all the secret details we're going to discuss in the break.
We want to have that publicly on YouTube.
No, I think it was the alcohol on Friday.
It's possible.
It's not like while we were meeting?
Yeah, it was afterwards.
Okay, because I was like...
No, that was a beer. That was one thing. No. I'm fragile, but not that much.
Did you watch the Portugal Spain game?
Yeah, I went to meet my brother-in-law. It was our first time out.
Ever? Oh, okay.
Because just arrived to them with 2 months.
Good bonding experience?
Yeah.
Have you been following the World Cup, Joanne?
Yeah. If I'm not able to see a match, I'll at least see the scores afterwards.
Yeah.
Germany and Mexico is happening today.
I know.
So you follow it?
I mean, I have to. It's
Okay.
like one of my citizen obligations.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but if you catch me not cheering on Germany, I would go to jail.
No, I would be like I would be quite excited about this World Cup if I was German, like defending the title. I think it's a big thing.
Yeah, never been done, I think. So, and the thing is that it won't happen. It's just because so far everything's been going great. Okay, Germany played a terrible qualification. Qualification was okay, but like the lead up to the tournament was pretty brutal. Like we lost to Austria. I mean, I say we, but actually Austria is also we for me. So like I was actually when Austria plays Germany, I'm rooting for Austria, so I was happy about that. But I mean, it's not a team that you should lose to as the last game before the World Cup. It's kind of a bad signal. But then Germany is just good at tournaments, so I'm not too worried. But I think they don't have any injured players right now. The goalkeeper Manuel Neuer got fit in time. Coaches did everything he wanted to do in the preparation. Everything went well in the like physical state. So I was like, it's almost like okay, you're at 100%. Everything's going well. Those teams never win. And so it's always the teams that have actual like issues or need to like restructure like at short notice. We'll see.
Spain was very strong after that sack coach.
Yesterday's match for Argentina was quite disappointing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Iceland played pretty well. From Iceland's viewpoint,
you underestimate the Icelandic and then you get fucked. Right? In the Euro Cup, you could see that.
I mean, they were lucky that it was the game, like the pitch was like on an incline like this towards their goal. I mean, there was nothing happening for the last 30 minutes. They were just hanging on to dear life, and they were lucky too. I mean, there were a couple of good attempts, but yeah, like Argentina didn't really create as much as they. They kept doing the same sort of thing with like Messi trying to go through 6 people. In the middle of the,
no, but you saw how they had been marking Messi, and Iceland knew that a draw is good enough for them, so they had all their players just right near the D zone.
Yeah.
And Messi missed a penalty, which was a huge break for Iceland. Yeah.
That was, I mean, it's always funny to watch these games because you know this is all like very direct history of that country. Just like Denmark and its stupid 1992 European Cup win. 2 irregular goals against brave Germans.
What was that?
In 1992, Denmark won the European Championship.
Okay.
So it's always been acknowledged that will be the biggest sporting football achievement of Denmark. And it was.
I mean, like even I know about it.
Exactly. Everyone knows about it. It's a part of cultural heritage, and it was a really like sympathetic win because they didn't qualify for that.
I'm pretty sure it usually shows up on the integration test that you know about that game.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it.
Where was it played? Who scored the goal?
Yeah.
It's crucial.
And when I see things like that, I'm just like, fuck football, fuck you.
But it's how it is important history. Like I mean, if you want to spark up a conversation with a Dane somewhere, it's like you better bring up the 1992.
Not with me.
I was quite ignorant about Denmark's footballing achievements. I don't know, for some reason I thought Denmark doesn't really it doesn't really have that much of a name in footballing world. So just before the match,
don't tell that around
town. In my workplace, they were quite excited. I was like, did Denmark qualify for the World Cup? And they were really taken aback. Yeah,
it's a fair question because they
They said, of course we did.
I don't think that's an of course at all. I think it was in the very last relegation round. But it's funny that Sweden and Denmark and Iceland are all in the World Cup, whereas Italy, Holland.
I'm looking
US.
forward to Iceland and Denmark can be together.
Is that possible?
If they went a little bit up in 16 or 8 round, they can be.
I think we can just take a picture and let them do whatever these post-its want to do.
Yeah. But maybe I guess the break is also kind of over.
Get some water.
But I think I'd take these ones down and then try to get them down. You already kind of distilled them, right?
The what?
You already mapped the other ones onto these ones, right?
Yeah. It's this repetition of the 3 big points.
So this one is actually for Daniel.
Mm-hmm. And probably you could make a decision today whether instead of just trying out different tools, they could just concentrate on GitHub for even for project management. And they could just look at some open source examples where projects with clear tasks are defined. You can just move them from to do and in progress. And if they want to be really efficient, they could even try the possibility of your issues are when you make a pull request and you identify the issue that you worked on and it's merged, so the thing is also moved through your project board. Yeah, but it really
I haven't been working so much with issues because we don't do it at work.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I don't want to be too involved in how they run their backlog.
Yeah.
Because it's very much like
it's just that
day-to-day management.
It's just to prevent the time spent in figuring out which tool is good for us because
have you been doing it a lot?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So can you make sure show me that?
Yeah.
Sure. So we take that on the tool section?
Yeah. And you can even I don't know if you go back to something like React or any good open source project.
Yeah, you can see how they do it there.
Yeah, exactly. They have a project section as well within their GitHub.
Mm-hmm. But let's just.
They're doing MongoDB.
Well, we're going to do like a research spike
Okay.
trying to, because it's either Next.js or maybe
Okay.
Mongo.
Okay. Okay, there will be Zeppelin as well.
So that's your time to shine.
Mm. Who's?
You're
How?
so you're going to demo the GitHub issues.
Okay.
That's annoying.
Zach, how about if you write down like by the text, this whole project?
Yeah, like
start
specifications and stuff like that.
Yeah, kind of like start like now we are grown like brainstorming.
Yeah, sure. But we are going to do that now. So,
So you should be okay. These are bootstrap.
What?
These are bootstrap. It's responsive.
No, I didn't use Bootstrap.
So how come it could fit into small smartphone?
I created with
Media query.
a media and then screen and like this. But yeah, it's like
Media query.
I have never used the Bootstrap.
Okay.
I know I have used Bootstrap for other websites. For example, this one.
Daniel, I just changed my mind about doing the minutes. So I think we'll just do it on the big screen. So we have it on the recording as well. I put all the post-its on your computer, so maybe hand them to me.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, how do we do this best? Maybe just let's just roll with Atom.
Hi. Sorry.
So.
Worse.
Need a chair?
No.
I can give you a little bit of the, and then maybe you can just edit it.
Huh?
I can send you what I wrote, and then you can just edit if you want.
Yeah, sure. Maybe you can just copy paste from that on Slack or. Let's see.
Just gonna post it on the channel.
The African channel?
Yeah.
You know, this
Fan.
Okay, so it's kind of small typing. Actually, the handling on Saturdays was the idea was 12 a.m.
Okay.
So we have some more time, but that's something. That's just a number. We can discuss that. So this is all of the stuff that Daniel wrote down. So let's try to figure out a way to put that into some things that we can make like the working agreement for all of us. Can people read this, or is it still too small? So how are we going to do this? This is not mapped together, right?
No, that's just
the way it came out.
Yeah.
How is it? Does anyone remember on Atom how you can split the screen? Split right? Yep. Okay, so maybe if you look at these ones, that was like the OR one. Make a to-do list and agree on priority and scope. That would be what's called a backlog in Scrum terms. So I just make a point here called backlog, and then we try to find all of the ones over here that's related to backlog, and try to sort it like that. Could be a little bit, but not really. Split and agree the workload. That's definitely something to do with the backlog. This one. Well. Share code, even review each other's to-do list. Use Trello. Now I'm just going to put in a suggestion made by Jawad a couple of minutes ago. Use GitHub issues, because that can kind of do the same. Use Trello Scrum. Discuss the requirements, use Agile. Yeah, that's kind of part of it. I don't know, that could go many places. Yeah, there will be some repeated things here, because right now I just take and move all the stuff that's related to the backlog over there. But it's a little difficult because some of them could maybe be related to something else as well. So I'm not sure how it goes. We'll see pretty soon. I guess I can just scroll. Use frequent meetings, respect deadlines. So I think there's something here. So if we call this one backlog and iterations, because iterations is about delivering part of a project at a designated time. So if we put that one in there, there's something about deadlines. Okay. And this one is, well, related to that. Or maybe let's break it out. So because the two last ones were about that. So that's another topic. Then there's communication. I see a lot of stuff about that down here. Sorry? Create Slack channel for your team. I just want to add something here. Use mentions appropriately. Do you know how the different mentions work? So channel will send a notification to everyone at any time. So that's probably not the one you want to use all the time. But you can use here. That would just like give a notification to whoever is online on Slack at the moment. And then you can do like a name, like if you want to mention a mentor or something like that, then you will send a a notification specific to him. Yeah, and there's one class 4 as well, like this. So the channel one is the one you should look out for, maybe not use.
Like 1 or 2.
Yeah. Frequent communication. GitHub communication. Oh man, we're going to communicate so much this time. It's going to be amazing. So this one, you know, like pull request is also communications. There's a bit of overlap there, but I'm planning on putting another one here that's called Git flow pull request.
Task management.
Yeah, I guess the first one is task management. Right?
Yeah.
And this one is iterations, sprints, deliverables. I'm just going to put some more words on it because all of this are Scrum related words, I think. Communication is of course just communication, but it's also Scrum related one way or another. Share code, even small changes. I think there's not something about work in progress. So let's put that there.
What's about staying in the scope?
Yeah. And I also see another topic that's about the physical meetings. So I think this one is actually related to physical meetings because that's what you do if you can't physically meet. So then you go on a screen sharing session, right? I think in theory you should be able to do the entire project without meeting physically, but I think you'll have a really hard time getting the same out of it as if you meet physically. But I know like some people, they specialize in using just like Skype and stuff like that, and making some processes for that, because that's the thing, you need to think about having some specific processes so you make sure that the stuff that if you meet with one person and the other person is always on Skype, you need to have some way to know that all the informal stuff is shared with the guy who's only on Skype.
You can do screen sharing and calls in Slack as well nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm just that's true. I'm just saying Skype out of habit, but I would probably use Slack for it. But I mean, I don't recommend trying to do the remote thing with Slack or Skype or whatever if you have any chance of meeting physically. It's always a lot easier to meet physically if you don't have a lot of experience doing the other thing. Use GitHub, use GitHub, use GitHub / use GitLab. Let's just do that. Share the code in GitHub. I think we understand it now. Frequent communication with your partner. Sounds like relationship advice here. We got that one as well. Git pull requests for everything. I think maybe put that one. Yep. And this one is a big one. So let's give that one its own one up here. Cool. So now we actually have some place to go. Let's save this one real quick. So it is saved. Interesting. So now it shows me the desktop. I don't care about that. Okay. So we're down to having one point about, and this is of course, as I told you, there will be a working agreement for the team altogether, like for the class, and then you'll have to make working agreements for the individual teams. And this one with how many hours you're going to work is actually the team working agreement, because that one would be unique to each team. We will probably have like different commitments in each team, but we'll definitely get you started with that one during class right now, because that's really important, and that's also something that feeds into how we're going to put you in teams. So this one is something that we're going to take a little round in a few minutes and discuss in detail. Backlog task management. So there is definitely a desire to use some sort of tool to manage your backlog, and I think that's a great idea. I think it should be also up to the individual teams to decide what tool you want to use. But I just agreed with Jawad that he wants to show how you can use GitHub for that. So that's really nice that you can keep everything on GitHub. But I would also recommend trying using Trello, as you suggested. I think other people suggesting that as well. It really depends on what you prefer. I don't think I would feel a need to see your backlog. That's more just like a tool for the team. I just want to see the code that you produce. And maybe I will, at some point, I will ask you how you're planning to achieve to get to some point, and then you have to look in your backlog and see what did you actually agree on. But it's not like I feel a big need to be looking over your backlog all the time. It's more like a tool for your team. So I think maybe we should kind of divide these things into like class working agreements and team. I'm now being really lazy. And I messed it up. So this one is on the team working agreement. Let's do it like that. And this one is as well. Oh, not like that. Let's do it like that. And it's not like all of this is your working agreement. That's just some input that we had when we did the roundtable, right? But the main team working agreement is that you're going to use some sort of tool for your backlog. So then there's something about respecting deadlines and handing on in before the actual deadline. I just told you that this is something you need to decide in the teams, but for some of them, we might tell you that we want to see it, that it's mandatory. For instance, the first one right now, we expect you to, we're going to do a individual assignment for each of you, and we expect to see that one at no later than Saturday. But I mean, we could maybe put it down here as well. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that. Okay, so communication. So there's definitely something about being available on all platforms, and it's something that goes for both the class and for the team, because for the class we need to know if you're coming to class, and as mentors we need to you to be responsive, and we also need you to, if someone is asking for help on the Slack channel, we want you to be there and read that, and if you're able to respond to it, respond to it. So I think that one goes in the class one here. Of course, that means you should also be available for your team, right? So everything that's up here will also be valid for the team. Doing pull requests, that's also something that we agree on doing across both class and team. Physical meetings, that's really up to the individual teams how you decide to do the actual work. So, cool. should we try to? So this is way too long to actually be a working agreement, because a working agreement should be something where, in theory, I could come to your home and wake you up at night and say, what's the working agreement, and then you know it. It should be something that you can remember, because it's like it's a policies for how we work, right?
Please give Zach your phone number so you can
and your address. It might be a little bit creepy, but
and you must also be able to knock on your window.
yeah. So I think like the first one is just we respect deadlines. We check our communications platforms.
Yeah, we maintain open communication.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not saying that you should be able to, while you're working with whatever you're working with during the day, that you should be able to respond to everything right away. But at least read it daily and respond as soon as you possibly can. As soon as it is. Then there is the part about the transparency. Is that all right? Use GitHub to share code, and we always use pull requests, and don't merge any code without at least one approved review. Please tell me if someone disagrees. Does that cover everything for the class working agreement?
That is a review from the mentor or from the workman?
Huh?
The email you talked about, is it a review from the mentor?
That is, well, in general, I would say from one of your peers, so from your teammate. But there can be some stopping points. So for instance, now you're going to do some prototypes during this week individually. And before we can kind of like put it into the main repository, because that will be used by everyone, then I think mentors have to approve that. But that's something that we discuss along the way, whether it's something that has to be approved by a mentor or if it's enough by students. In general, all the work that you're doing, like teamwork, it's just getting it approved by students. But you're always more than welcome to ask a mentor to have a look at your pull requests and look through it and give some feedback, because that's a really good point in time for us to see the stuff that you're doing, because it gets a lot more messy to try to change something once you have merged it, right? But in general, you are in control of merging the stuff on your individual team. So maybe there's another thing here about how we use Git. So there's going to be one main repository, and each team will be working on a fork of that main repository. So that means we copy the main repository down to your own GitHub profile. So one of the students in the group will have that on their profile, and the other one will then be a collaborator. And if there are more, they will be collaborators. And then when we finish up the project, we can do like a fork from one student's repository to the next one, so everyone will have it on their GitHub profiles in the end. But while we're working on it, we need to make sure that one student has the group repository. There will be one main repository for the short project. Fork the fork. Yep. And then there's the team working agreement. We set a goal for how many hours a week we work. Try to, what's it called? Try to do that. Try to, yeah, respect that.
How do you open Windows?
What's it called if we cannot come? What's that called if we are absent? Yeah. Yeah.
We don't respect that one.
Where's the fan go?
On the other side, the fan.
It has a automatic mechanism that sometimes locks down when it thinks it's raining. It's very accurate, as you see.
Yeah.
Do we need to tell how long before you give notice to the team members if you're delayed or if you can't come? in. I think it depends, because if you're delayed, of course it could be like you only know it 10 minutes before, but if you cannot come, it's probably like 4 hours before or the day before or something like that. But that's something you can discuss in detail within your team. So if you feel like you need to have something more specific. Um, yeah, or something I can really recommend. I don't want to put it in here. It's something you need to discuss with your team, but something that you usually do during Scrum is you do daily stand-ups. So that means you have like a 5-minute meeting in the morning where you discuss what are you going to do, what have you done yesterday, and if you need something from someone else to be finished, or if you need to coordinate or something like that. I think it would be very much worthwhile for you to not you shouldn't be meeting every day, of course, but you could either do a Slack call or maybe just a Slack message in your team channel saying, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm going to do today, I need this and this and that. And even if it's like a day where you're working and you cannot do anything, it's just like, yeah, so today I'm working, I cannot do any work today. It's a really good idea to do that consistently every day. So you have that communication going. Then you also know if someone else on the team is like, yeah, okay, so I have the day off. I'm going to be working on Hack Your Future. I'm planning on implementing this and that feature. Then when you're working, you might be like, okay, so he or she is working on that. And maybe you get some ideas that you can input, and you could tell that the next day or something like that. But it's just a really, really good idea just to keep the communication going. On a daily basis. And I mean, like, if you're going to check Slack every day, you might as well just post a little message saying, I did this and that. And it takes like a couple of minutes to do that. So that's something I really recommend. So I mean, like, probably this section here is more like a recommendation for you, for your team to do. So let's just put that in there. And that one also hooks into the communicate frequently. Then there's the backlog thing. We agree on using a tool to maintain our backlog off. There's something about staying on scope, splitting and agreeing on workload. Okay, so there was the thing I said about like delegating work, but not delegating everything. I think that's important to have in there. Sure, everyone has has knowledge, have some knowledge of all code that gets merged. So this one is of course also resolved by doing proper pull requests and reviews. Staying in the scope, that one is like a really difficult one, especially if you're not experienced, because you always have a tendency to try to make everything really great, and you can like keep working on something, but then you might not have the time to do something else. So that's really a balance, but it's so incredibly important. I'm not sure what kind of advice to give you for this one, except that you should of course get some feedback.
Just give like overview what's both of you what you do. Each has overview. So this is kind of like keep you in the scope.
Yeah. So you are going to, if you do the daily stand up, you are going to discuss these things. But I think we should have like a point. Strive to build the products So, you know, it's a matter of priorities. I write, we strive to build a product according to the specification, but without wasting time on over-engineering or gold-plating features. Gold-plating, do you know that word? Gold-plating. So, imagine that you build the new iPhone, right? And it works, and everything is really good right now. But then you're like, it's not nice enough. It needs to have like a plating of gold, so it's like really nice. But does that actually add some value to the phone? Does it make it a better phone or just a nicer phone? Maybe if you want to gold plate, you could do that after you do all the other stuff that you need to make it work. So maybe you make the golden iPhone, but you have no antennas, so it doesn't work at all. You don't have like an infrastructure for phones. Maybe you just go and work on the infrastructure before you start making the best phone in the world, right? So that's just the idea about avoiding gold plating, because making really nice products is of course really great, but if you don't have all the fundamentals so you can actually use that nice product, then it's just a waste of time. It's over-engineering, and it's one of the most common mistakes that people do when they engineer something. So I mean, as I told you, these ones are mainly recommendations. So I suggest once you have your team that you sit down and you discuss these things, try to figure out if you need to do something different, if you need to specify something more. Maybe you need to have a discussion about when are you over engineering something, and when is it the just right amount of engineering. But the ones up here in the top, I think, is what's given on class. So the question is, do you have some input for this stuff here? Because I feel like I'm just like writing stuff for you, but on the other hand, you did come up with all these things in the beginning, but maybe I'm turning these into how I want it to be working. So please be critical. Is there something here that you feel is and I can zoom it up a little more if you need that. So the section here, is there something here you need to change something, add something, remove something? Okay. But I mean, like, let's say that the deadline for finishing the working agreement is next week. So we're going to put this one into the GitHub repository, and we're going to make it as a pull request, of course. So everyone can go into the pull request and you can type comments. So you can go home and you can think about this, and then you can go on the pull request and then you can type comments if there's something. Maybe it's written in a way where it's difficult to understand because it's my words. It's not necessarily, or yeah. Or maybe there's just something you need to change. So please use the pull request for that. Daniel, can you do that pull request for me? So cool. Let's get on with the class. So now we have a.
It's not changing something, but I think you've already written troll.
Huh?
You've already written troll. Is it
Trello.
Trello or Trello? You can remove the first one.
I can remove Trello or what?
Yeah,
If you go down,
Yeah.
you can remove one of the two. Is it the first one? Because it is Trello.
But down here, this one is the one that matters. This part is the part that goes on GitHub, and I didn't mention GitHub or Trello there because it's up to you guys if you want to use one or the other. Okay.
I thought you are going to put everything.
Yeah, I mean maybe we'll put the other stuff on the Slack channel so you have it for reference. But in the GitHub repository, we'll put this one, and we'll put this one. Okay. So let's get on with the slideshow. So we did a working agreement. That's amazing. And the best thing is I'm actually recording all this, so we have it on tape. So if someone is not, then we can say we have you on tape saying you want to do this and you didn't do it. Oh, we're not going to do that. But so did you see the presentation for the class 03 last week? I was showing this slide as well, and maybe you remember I showed the same slide where I just like said that everything was not going linear like this, and it's of course not going to do that here either. But this is like the overall process that I would suggest trying to do. So the first thing is all about understanding what is the product that we're going to build, understanding the tools that we're going to use to build that. Of course, a lot of that has taken place during the previous weeks, understanding React, understanding MySQL, understanding Node, and so on. But you'll need to understand even more. And we are going to throw in some, not like completely new programming languages, but we kind of expect you to go and do some research on some libraries that might help you go faster towards the final product and build a nice product. So that's actually what we're doing this week. We're in the understand phase right now. We're trying to understand the product and we're trying to understand the tools that we're going to use for the product. Then the next step is to decide on some sort of architecture. So make a decision. These are the tools that we're going to use. These tools are maybe too complicated to use, or they are designed for something else, or there might be a lot of different reasons. Then the next step is to try to justify or validate that architecture by building some prototypes. Actually, already now this diagram is not completely correct, because by the end of today I'm actually going to send you home to do some prototypes even before we decide on an architecture. But then next time when we're trying to decide on an architecture, we might send you home to do more prototypes. So it's never completely linear, and it's not supposed to be linear. But it's nice to try to understand the different elements and the different phases that we'll be going through. Then we're going to try to build kind of like a static version of the application. That's actually also a prototype, so that's actually kind of part of that. I'm realizing that right now. Sometimes I'm a little faster on drawing these things, but this is basically a prototype. So we'll try to build the user interface just in React without using an API and things like that, just to have something up and running, have something so you can get an idea how to implement the user interface, and then we'll try to design the API that we need, the data model, how is React going to communicate with the API. And again, these two things can actually run alongside each other, so maybe you split up the work a little bit. But just remember not having one person doing all the API work and another one doing all the React work, because then suddenly you don't know what the other one is doing. It's really important. If you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't really understand what the other guy in my group is doing. Then go and like pull him in their arm or her or whatever and say, please explain to me what you're doing. Why are you doing it that way? And if I can in some way contribute to that so I get a better understanding, please tell me what I can do. Because it's natural that one person will, of course, come ahead in terms of some technologies and maybe even in terms of the entire project, because we're not going to find two of you who are completely learning at the same pace. But it's so important that within the teams that you try to alleviate that. So if one is falling behind, if it's you falling behind, try to be open about it and tell the other team member. If you're the one who's leaping ahead, who's coming really fast ahead, then maybe try to slow down a little bit and take some time to explain the other group member, because otherwise you will just end up building an entire project and you will get stressed and it will not be a pleasurable experience for you either. Okay, so that was a little bit I got a little distracted there, but I mean, a lot of these things can take place at the same time, even though I just put it up in a diagram like that. But I suggest trying to build a prototype of the user interface first, then figuring out like the underlying API, and then eventually wiring up everything so the prototype UI works together with the API. But again, it's a preference. Some people prefer to get the API up and running and really have a lot of details in terms of that before they build the UI. So you could do either. But try to recognize that there are some different tasks within the project, and this is one way that you can do it, and that's like the way that I suggested it. It's not necessarily the right way. There's a lot of ways that might be just as good. But you can try this out. And I think that would be better than just not having thought about the process at all and then just doing whatever springs to mind. Then I prepared kind of like an overall project plan in terms of what we're going to do during the different sessions, just so you have an idea. And this is probably going to change all the time. But now at least we have a plan. So this is the first session today. So we're trying to understand the project. We want to do a working agreement. We already did that. And then we want to do some research spikes. And that's what I'm telling you about. I'm going to send you home to do some prototypes individually. And then on the next session, you're going to come back with some new knowledge based on those research spikes. We're going to discuss that. I'm not actually going to be here next week, so I hope that the other mentors will be able to follow up on that. Then the plan is to have a look again at the requirements, because we're going to talk today about like maybe I should put that's part of understanding the project. So today we are going to talk about the requirements. We're going to try to work out some user stories. And then next time, when we've been doing some more research, we're going to just have a little quick look at that again and make sure that everything is still the way that we thought it was. And then the plan is to try to decide on an architecture. And it might change again later on, but based on all the stuff that we find out during the week when you're working on your own, we should hopefully have some better knowledge to decide on something. Then the idea is to split the project into 3 different iterations. And I think I actually have a slide after this one telling exactly what iterations is. But an iteration is just like building something that we can demo. So the idea is you're going to have a demo here of the first version of the product. Then you're going to have a demo of the second version of the product, the third version. And then during the 6th session, you're going to demo the final project, but there's actually a week after that before you're going to present it. But that week, we don't want you to implement any new features. We're going to do what's called a code freeze. So you're not allowed to implement any new features, but you are allowed to fix any bugs that might encounter. Because if you keep developing new features until the night before you're going to present it, You can kind of imagine what might happen, right? So you probably end up standing there presenting something that doesn't work. So we'll try to keep the last week of the project as a code freeze period where you're only fixing new bugs. And it's also a really bad idea to fix the latest bugs the night before. So try to keep like at least the last 24 hours or so before the presentation being like, don't commit any code during that time. But definitely don't make any new features during the last week. So plan ahead. Make sure that you make a plan so you have the entire product finished 1 week before. Yeah, so that's the overall project plan. And then I'm just going to give you a really high level quick introduction to Scrum. And I think the best way to do it is just to explain you some of the terminology that we use in Scrum. So Scrum is like a project management tool. It's a way of working together that almost all software companies are using these days. There are maybe a few that are not using it, and there are a lot of them that say that they use Scrum, but they use some sort of variant which is arguably not Scrum. But most of them try to use Scrum because people tend to have a lot of success doing that. And there's some elements to Scrum, and maybe I'm not going to do it in this order because I think the first one to tell you about is the backlog. And that's just basically a to-do list. So you just like make a list of all the stuff that you need to be building, and you put that in a backlog. So you know, have an overview of all the work that you need to be doing. And we already discussed that in the working agreement that you're planning on doing that for all of your teams. So what is it that you put in that backlog? Well, you could just put like tasks saying do this, do that, do this, do that, and so on and so on. But there is a format for these kind of tasks that is recommended in Scrum, and that's a user story. And it kind of has a template, so it's like as a something, I need something so that something. Maybe it sounds a little bit weird. So let's have an example. So let's say maybe I can take an example from my work at DR. So maybe as a journalist, I need a tool to write articles so that the news can be published on the web, something like that. So this makes sure that you know who are you developing this for, because maybe a journalist is going to respond differently to the kind of user interface you are designing compared to if you were designing this as a tool for developers. So journalists probably don't want a tool that's incredibly technical to use. They want something that's user-friendly. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a journalist, it needs to be user-friendly because they're not so used to very technical tools. I'm generalizing a lot here, but that's like the basic idea, knowing who you're designing for. And then there's the I need, so that's the thing that you actually want to build. So that was like a tool to publish or write articles, right? So that's where you need to dive into and figure out what you need to do. And this task is probably too broad and too generic to be a proper user story. You want to break it down much more. So maybe it's more like, as a journalist, I need to be able to make a headline bold so the users know that this article is more important than other articles. That's maybe a better user story, I think. So the final part, I call it the value proposition. And that's incredibly important. And people, when they write user stories, they tend to skip that. They just say, as a journalist, I need a tool to make my headlines bold, full stop. And then they end there. But the last part is actually the most important because that's understanding why are you designing this in the first place. Because you might realize that you implemented a lot of features that nobody wanted to use or needed or anything like that, and that was just a waste of time. And you could have been implementing some other features that were better. So that's why the last part is actually incredibly important. So knowing that the reason why you want a tool that can make the headline bold is because if you make the headline bold, people will see that article sooner and they will recognize that this article is really important. Maybe it's like, it could also be like at DR you have like a breaking news functionality. You've probably seen that. It's in basically all newspapers these days, and a lot of newspapers are misusing it shamefully, but it's like if something is happening right now and it's like a major event, then maybe you put it put like a breaking news label on it. Maybe you make it yellow, and so it's just like springs out of the layout more, so the user will recognize that this is something that's important to know right now, right? So that's why the value proposition is important. And in a few minutes, we're going to try to take the requirements that Christopher wrote and turn them into proper user stories. And then finally, there's the terminology of having a sprint. And there's kind of like, often we use like a few different words for a little bit the same, and then it's not completely the same. So sometimes we might be talking about having a sprint. Sometimes we might be talking about iterations. We might also talk about a deliverable. So these things kind of like go together a little bit. A sprint is the idea that in Scrum you usually set aside like either 1 week or 2 weeks, where you just like work for 1 week and then you demo. Then you demo what you're doing. And if you didn't finish some features, it's all right. You just demo it on the next demo 1 week after. But it's not like you move the demo or anything like that. The demo is always at one designated time. So let's say you have like 1 week sprints, then you probably have the demo maybe on a Friday. And then you finish as much as you can within the sprint. So the sprint is kind of like, this is how much we plan to be able to finish during this week. So you have a look at the backlog and you're like, okay, so you can do it like this. We estimate the different user stories, figure out how long do we think this will take. And then we kind of like say, this is how much we think we'll be able to do within 1 week. And then we try to finish as much as possible. But if some of it doesn't get finished, which is usually the case, it's not like the end of the world. We'll just like push it to the sprint the week after. But it's kind of like if you imagine that you have to get on a train. So there's a fixed train schedule. It's not like the train is going to wait like 3 or 5 minutes for you because you're a little bit late. You have to wait for the next train. That's the idea about having a sprint here and having a demo on a certain time. And that's what we're going to do when we talk about iterations. So an iteration is a little bit the same as a sprint. When you iterate, it's like going over something again and again. Maybe you know it from loops in JavaScript. Sometimes people call them iterators because they are going over something again and again and again and again. And it's the same idea with a sprint. So you have like one sprint, the next sprint, the next sprint, the next sprint, and so on and so on. But the important thing is whenever you demo something, it has to be something that works. You cannot demo something that doesn't work because then, of course, it's not really a demo, right? But you have to think about a way to give something that the end user can use. So if you have to do Scrum properly, you have to be building one feature at a time. So let's say this is the breaking news feature. Then you have to build the stuff you need on the database to do that. You need to do some work in the API. And you need to do some work in the front end. And you need to test all of that. And all of that has to take place within a sprint. If you didn't complete all of those, you cannot demo it. So if you completed all of that before the demo, then you can take it to the demo and you can show that this is working. And then the customer who is hopefully paying for the product knows that now I have this feature is actually finished. Because if you just develop the front end for that feature and the back end doesn't work and you go and demo that, then the customer will think, oh cool, I have a breaking news feature. I want to be using that all the time. But there's no back end for it. It's not working properly. It's only working on the developer's computer, right? And usually you also say that you need to be able to deploy that feature within the sprint. It depends a little bit on the organization. But if you can deploy that feature and have it running in the product, in production, that would be the best for sure. But we're not going to, I don't know if we will at some point be discussing deploying your products, but that's not really within the scope of this project. So these are like the 3 big terms within Scrum that I wanted to introduce you to. Any questions about all of this?
I just used Scrum before, like all what you said is right, but you have only like table that you have to do this, and you have shipping, and you have done.
Yeah.
So,
No, probably not shipping, probably more like doing or something like that.
yeah,
Or
doing something like going on.
yeah,
the
yeah,
process,
ongoing.
And then you check it.
Yeah.
And then this keep you actually in the track.
Yeah, that's a very common way to have a backlog. So you have like to do, doing, done, or something like that, and you can maybe fill that up. So you can do that in Trello, where you can make different lists. So you can maybe have like a to do, doing, and code review, being tested. So maybe after the code review, someone has to go in the user interface and test it, and then finally done. Or maybe it's to do, doing, code review, testing, waiting for deployment, done. So it's not done until it's actually been deployed. That depends on the team, depends on the company, how you would set that up. And I've seen all kind of different variations over that. Right. So any of you mentors have some additions to this? Something you think is really important to bring up in Scrum that I didn't cover?
Well, I don't have any ideas in Scrum itself, because again, as you said, it changed from one team to another. You just fit the needs of your team. So the terminology or how many stages you have, some people will have done, some people will have another stage will have done after testing. Depends on what you do. But working in a team in an organized way and arranging tasks, this is one of the most important things that you can do in a team. It's actually, I might argue it might be more important than the technical stuff itself. Because in companies, they don't hire you for only the technical stuff. If you are a team member that can work within a team and are willing to learn, they're going to teach you the custom stack that they have. But the things that you always have to have is the knowledge of working in a team and sharing, be part of the team in general. But technologies, they always vary, they always change. So this is the core part of the software. It's really, really important. So if we're using React today, it might be Vue in 2 years, it might be something else in 3 years. But it's always working in a team and arranging the work and knowing how to split tasks and communicate better. So yeah,
that actually makes me remember something I was thinking about on the train here. That's I think is really important. So I didn't make a slide for it because I only remember on the train. But if we were to talk about like the learning goals, or maybe in general the goals of being here for this class, this is maybe a little bit of a big topic just to take like spontaneously. But it is important enough that we should probably discuss it a little bit. So I think one really big goal of doing this project is, of course, to make sure that all of you get something valuable on your GitHub profiles, right? That's something that employers can see. So I mean, like the end goal of this course is to get you some work, right? So one really big goal is to get some code on your GitHub profiles. But personally, as a mentor, in terms of how much you're learning, I'm more interested in having some learning goals. And in terms of learning goals, I'm not so interested in seeing really, really sophisticated code on your GitHub profile. Actually, in most cases, sophisticated code is over-engineered code. Most of the time, the good code is really, really simple. What I'm more interested in seeing is that you're able to work together, collaborate. And that's something that we've seen in the past projects, that people have been doing like individual work throughout the HTML and JavaScript course and so on. And now they finally have to do this project. And to be honest, they don't do very well in terms of like the teamwork. So we see a lot of times that people just they don't talk about together what they're doing, all that stuff. And I think like really a main learning goal for me here is to see you at least get better at working together. I realize that we don't have like all the time in the world to teach you a collaboration, but at least exposing you to some of the difficult things when you're working together, because it's a completely different game to be a programmer working together with others than just being solo. And it's actually the most important game, because programming today is not solo work. It's very social work. It's collaborative work. You depend on the team. And you'll be surprised that people who have not a lot of programming skills can actually do really well if they have a really strong team together with someone who can complement them in other ways. So the collaboration is just like, for me, if I see people do really great collaboration, even if the programming level is not very high, that's what makes me really, really happy. And then another thing that I started thinking about, because I was thinking this is like the main thing for this final project. But now I'm kind of realizing that now we have like pretty challenging final project. And I think another thing is I really want you to see you be able to do research on your own. So go home, read documentation for something. Maybe it's an external API. Maybe it's a library we want you to be using or something like that. Go home, read documentation, build some sort of prototype. How can this work out? And then try to implement that into your own project. That's also something that's incredibly important to learn. And these things are much more important to learn than knowing exactly why you have to use like triple equals instead of double equals in JavaScript or something like that. Those things are not like, you can just like set up JS lint or something like that, and that will make sure that you can never do double equals, and you don't need to know why you shouldn't be doing that. So the collaboration is the most important part, and being able to find research and find knowledge on your own is another, like that's the two main learning goals I see in this project. And try to keep that in the back of your mind when we're doing these things. And that's not necessarily part of Scrum, but it's still very closely related. Yeah. And of course, if you want to learn more about Scrum, first of all, you can Google it, but you're also more than welcome to come and ask us mentors. I think like most of us have been heavily exposed to Scrum at our work because most companies are using it, as I already said. And that also means that you'll probably be exposed to it when you get a job, and there's also a pretty good chance that employers will ask you during an interview, have you ever worked with Scrum? And then you can tell them, yeah, sort of, we did a little bit in this project, and we did like this and this and that. So, cool. So now we're actually going to talk about the project. That's really exciting, but maybe this is a good time to maybe take that break because it's 2:25. We have a pretty packed program today, so I'm hoping maybe 15 minutes, is that enough to get a little bit to eat and then come back here? Okay, so 2:40. Cool. Let's do a break.
You want to send me the file? You want to send me the file?
All of this, or
no,
the working agreement? Yeah,
yeah.
I know. Yeah, sure.
I'm thinking about putting some introduction on your README and then link to another file so it's a distinguished.
We didn't create a repository for the project yet, right? Did we? Okay.
There's like a,
because if not, then this is probably the time.
Maybe. If it wasn't you who created this?
No.
Okay. Then it was Christoph. But it's.
I apologize for being late.
No worries.
Did I mess it up?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and
but
I don't know if you realize that, but and there's maybe it's up to me and to Ahmed to make a change.
Yeah.
But you're the only one talking.
Yeah.
And that makes them like.
I realize that I'm muscling through a little bit, but it's kind of like because I'm a little stressed out about how much we need to.
No,
cover.
I know, and I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah.
So we can.
At least if you can ask some questions along the way, so you
and
break up the flow a little bit. That would be nice.
One of the things that everybody has their tone, right? And I can see that the sound in the class is always the same because it's your tone.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a lot of information.
Yeah, it is. I know.
But yeah.
But at least we're recording it right now, so you can tell them, go home and listen, and you can as well, Magdi. So
yeah. How does that?
It would be like really boring to listen to.
The next part?
No, it's just that we're recording everything, so you can watch it over again.
Can you get the inputs of the others?
Huh?
Can you get the questions of the others? Does it reach? Like if
Yeah. I don't know.
Probably not.
You might have to turn up the volume really loud or something. So yeah, and we're actually recording now as well. So don't tell Christopher that he's an idiot or anything like that.
No plan.
Why is always closing?
But it was such
Maybe
a
it's-
big relief when it did open.
I discussed it with me and
Pigeon shit. No.
they say that it has something to do with it has sensors that opens and closes. And
Yeah, I
things
know,
and
depending on the weather. But Mike, maybe if you go on the Google Docs, then I just like quickly sum up what we did so far.
Google Docs. How can I use that?
So go on Slack and I posted a link to this one.
Or you send me the agreement. Have you seen the
Oh wow, we're really busy because we didn't even do like presentation of the different tools.
No. But maybe we can skip that and
Yeah, it's just that we were going to send some of them home to research them, but I guess we could show them for the lines.
or we can skip the project.
I mean, like they could, you can tell them like, for instance, for the reactive search thing, I was planning to tell them to reach out to you. Yeah. So we probably have to do like some individual mentoring on Slack then. So if you see, I did like plan for the day, working agreement process, project requirements. So that's where we're at right now. So yeah, so we might have to skip that one. That hurts me a little bit. And then finally presenting the research spikes for them to do. And that will probably take a while as well. So yeah, but I mean,
You need me in part of these to present like browser search and something.
yeah, that was the plan to do that during this one. I just don't.
Actually, I came here. Yeah, if I'm not needed, I actually have to be somewhere else.
Okay.
So if you don't need me,
Yeah, it's not really that important. It was just if we're going to do the presentation, it would be very nice to have you show them something reactive search. I don't know, you probably haven't anything prepared, so it's pretty limited anyway. And then of course like the Zeppelin thing, because did you see that I added basically everything we talked about now?
yeah.
So
with Zeppelin, actually, I think the Active Search as a company, they provide Zeppelin with a sketch for some mobile designs. But I think with Sketch you need to open from Sketch then import it to Zeppelin. I'm not sure how it actually works. Okay. So can we just import from a file that I think I need to export from?
But let's also have a look. So I think
you need to open.
Was it 7 students today? I think so.
What?
I think you were 7 students plus Jawad. And I'm not sure we should give Jawad a task, but it's nice if you.
6. This one is also.
He's a mentor.
So I have 6. 6.
So
yeah, but Jawad was there as well with his computer and he left now. I'm not sure if we should give him because you know he's an alumni, so he finished the program already.
Yeah, so he has already finished.
Yeah, but maybe he'll be doing some work on the project anyway, and maybe he wants to do some of the research work. We'll just figure out if this.
So it's.
How is going with this big?
Yeah, good. I'll work as usual. How's it going with you and your projects, implications?
It's actually I might have a chance to change my jobs right now.
Cool. That's good.
But it's maybe not so relevant to developing.
What are you gonna do?
It's about environmental regulations.
Nice.
It's like the manager will call me next Mondays. She said he will give me the offer, but she will call me next Monday. So I don't know what will happen.
Nice.
But I will finish this project.
So you're not gonna continue development, or you're gonna just go somewhere
No, I
else?
finished this project. It's nice to learn, but I mean, they give me the offer and they give me good pay, so
That's good. You need that as a stable,
Yeah.
just for some stability. That's good. Well, if you need any help with preparing the CV or LinkedIn again,
No, it's already
you know,
like
but
they said they will offer, but they will call me next.
I know but at any point of time, if you want to go back to React development and want to prepare your CV and stuff like that, let's do something. Prepare the CV or LinkedIn. And if you're planning to do this in 6 months from now, it's good to start now. Just move slowly.
I think
Avoid. Alhamdulillah. Sometimes.
I'm also thinking about this is a like good chance to get a good job, so I continue learning.
That's good. Keep up the good work.
But I will send your CV one day in case you got hire me.
What?
I mean, I will send my CV to you one day in case you're gonna hire me.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Always do that. Just send it to the community and just be active in general. That's the spirit.
Yeah.
Cool. And add me on LinkedIn as well, and add the others. Just be there. There are React recruiters in Copenhagen. Recruiters, yeah.
Yeah.
There are companies that.
Are there companies?
Yeah, the consulting companies that only hire open source specifically. Some of them only work with React developers, front-end React developers.
Yeah.
So I could connect you with them, and they always share stuff. And you can just ask them, "Hey, I'm an intern. I'm working in a company," and they're very active. So they could help you a lot with that.
Okay.
So use LinkedIn, send CV. I'll give you feedback. If you have your CV as a Google Doc, it would be even better as a Google document.
Okay, I will do it.
Yeah, I used to have my CV as a Word document in my laptop, and I would always change stuff. But having it as a Google document is way easier because you can share the link with me, and I could write comments, hey, do this, do that, and you can always have version and then download as PDF.
Yeah.
So that would help you a lot as well.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I will do it. I think it's smart that I can send you can add some comments.
Yeah, and write README files for your notifications project. And did you merge the PR yet that I sent to you?
Yeah.
Cool. So write good documentation, maybe some screenshots, create a website for GitHub pages.
Yes.
All this stuff would be amazing.
Okay, I'll do it.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Just pay me whenever you have time.
And as I'm sick this week and I'm working in the companies and they're afraid that I'm going to infect them. So they just said, please come back home. Don't work here. So they just kick me out. Don't allow me to work right now.
That's cool.
So Magdi, the biggest change since Friday is that I kind of came to the, or for me at least, I came to the realization that a really big part of this project is also throwing them kind of the lions in terms of like doing research work.
Yeah.
So that's why now I'm more open for them to just go and try to learn a little bit about all the crazy ideas that you have.
That's cool.
And then if they come back and they're really frustrated next week, we can like close it down again and say, okay, then just stick to this stuff here and keep it more conservative. But if they come back and they have some good prototypes and if they have seem to have learned enough that they could some way use it, then definitely we should go for it.
Definitely face problems, and that's the idea. That's what's
yeah,
going
for
to happen at
sure.
work.
Yeah.
And the point is, I want them to know that this is the point is not just doing the task. It's always exploring and always facing problem and always fixing it and coming back and asking for help and do it again.
The main thing is, I think the flip side to this is I think this will of course take a lot of attention away from just my idea of having them commit something within a week.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it works out. Maybe in the future we'll do something like just before the final project that they have to do like a simple stupid task and do it as a pull request. But then on the other hand, when we were talking with the class, it sounds like they have much more experience with Git, so we may not face that problem quite as much.
Really active. You want to do more stuff. All of them, they have their personal projects. So I think just pushing them as far as possible. It will be challenging, but fun as well. And challenging for us.
How do they like to know who we can group with or?
Well, I think we're going to form groups next week. Damn it, we haven't done the commitment round yet.
The what?
There's so much we need to do. We need to do a round where we discuss how much commitment they have, like how many hours.
Yeah,
That's like really important.
Actually, for us as well, like I don't think I'm not going to be there all the time, so I'm traveling in July.
Yeah.
At some point, I'm not sure if it.
Yeah, I won't be here next time, so I hope you can be here. You know.
If it's still in June, then I can.
Hmm?
If it's still in June, then I can. But then I have
Yeah.
my Danish exam, my
It's-
module exam in 25th, so I'm gonna have to study like.
Oh,
It's always
because this one is then 24th, right?
it's 23. Yeah.
17 plus 7. That's 24, right? Yeah, it is.
And I have my exam the next day.
Yeah.
I'm not studying anyway, so it's not a big deal. Probably fail.
Just do the class in Danish.
I'm not saying I'm not gonna be able to attend, but I'm not gonna be able to.
Okay, but let's figure out afterwards if we're covered in terms of mentors, because we still have like quite a lot of people on the train. It'd just be really nice to have you there because you have like a lot of the ideas for the prototype.
On the other side,
if you are the school's boss,
and I'm going to together with Christopher, we're going to Amsterdam next week to see the class there.
I think the intersection between
But I mean,
I don't really know.
I will be thinking a lot about Hack Your Future then, so maybe I'll be away to some degree on Slack, but I won't be here physically.
I think if we make the collaboration more online than in person, that would help us a lot. That's more flexible.
Yeah.
So with Isaac, we communicate on Slack and run a session of TV or months.
Yeah,
probably.
He shared his computer with me,
Yeah.
and I was hacking his computer.
Yeah, sure.
So we could have other ways, like standard tools, that help us just to jump in. Because like from our side, we could just jump in for half an hour and help someone just save 5 hours.
Yeah. But that was actually part of the reason now that we have like I don't know if we have that for all of them, but we have kind of like a mentor channel for each class. That was because I realized that if it's just going to be like two mentors talking together on a private on Slack about everything that goes on in class, then when the third mentor has to cover for them, then someone has to brief in on everything. Whereas if you have a channel, like parallel mentor channel and then a student channel, then another mentor can just join that channel and just pick up the. But that's basically what we have with the African music channel. You just have to remember to put our stuff in there because we did do some communication on private. So it's just like a little bit of a that's the thing.
Yeah, I think if you have a document, you have like a draft document that will like.
But first of all, if you see in the slides, I did like the plan for how I imagine
So what's the next step?
That's next time we should be discussing, or you guys, whoever is the here class, should be discussing like architecture. So feedback on the research bikes, then have a look again at the requirement specification, see if it's still up to date, and then make some decisions on the architecture. Of course, not like final, but try to take the research bikes and feed it in and say this we're using and this we're not. Yeah.
Do you live on Frederiksberg?
So.
No, I live in
I'll just follow you maybe.
Sometime, but most of the time.
Should I prepare a breakdown for accuracy?
For today, we won't make it today.
Okay.
But I mean, could you do like a video at home, something like that?
Yeah. Well,
that would be really cool if we can do some just to get them started. Not like super detailed.
I like the idea of just getting things started during the week. It doesn't have to be always.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that idea in general, not just about
sure.
but creating stuff.
That would be really nice.
So this is one of the things that you should write down. What should I write this down?
Yeah.
You should have stuff during the week.
Yeah.
So should we create another channel now?
Well, I think we're just using the African music channel for all this mental stuff, right?
Yeah, but it's going to get lost doing other discussions.
Yeah, I mean, like decisions and stuff like that is probably, that's where I'm doing it just like for my own notes right now. And figure out what we do
Share
after.
this as a Google Doc what
Yeah.
would be the
Yeah, true. I used to. I have that
Very good
type of
idea.
tool, so I used
What was it we just discussed?
that we would create videos to help them.
Yeah.
Like if something is new,
Yeah.
we would create something either a group called Music Hangout or videos to just move them forward and
Yeah.
speed up the process.
Yeah, actually, that's another thing. If
I'm not used to that.
it seems too daunting to create a full video or something like that, we could maybe do like a live session where they can call in on Slack, where we're just like doing a little demo.
Slack doesn't work as expected. Slack doesn't have
So very responsible.
It's not why, right?
It doesn't work for me. I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've tried it a bunch of times. It always annoys me.
Slows me down.
If your
I think
experience is good, maybe
I think
just
it works
try
really well for me.
Okay, then, yeah, let's give it a try.
Well, but let's discuss that after.
Programming language.
Okay, guys, I just realized that we are way more busy than I realized first. Because we actually have like an outstanding from earlier, which is, I didn't even write it up there. Okay, but it was part of the working agreement, the commitment thing. So we need to know how many hours you're expecting to work on the project. So we have a chance of pairing you up. Daniel, can you write it down? Cool. So Isaac, can you start out?
Average, I give it 40 hours a week.
40 hours a week? And you think it's realistic, or?
Yeah, I have all the time. I have all the time.
Okay, cool. You remember realistic, right?
Yeah, but now I'm not doing anything.
Oh, and wait a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so Isaac again. For the duration of the project, or do you have some things coming up or anything like that? That's something to talk about as well.
You're talking per week, right?
Yeah.
That's
But do you have like some exams coming, or do you have something like you're expecting that you'll be working during some weeks, or that you'd have to go on holiday for some weeks, or something like that?
okay, let me give it 35. But I don't expect anything.
Okay.
No.
So you can just work 40 hours a week from now till...
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Great.
So for now I'm not doing anything regular. I'm with a Vika company, so they can just call me up on short notice. But plus minus, I think I can give minimum 20 hours. I'm very sure of that.
Okay.
The problem with the job now is that, unlike before, I used to have a regular job where I can know my schedule, but now you can just call me up 1 hour before and say.
So the thing you need.
I think I can.
The thing you need to remember then is to make sure that you are on top of it in terms of like as soon as you get a notice, type on Slack.
Okay.
I'm sorry I can't come for teamwork right now. I got called to work or anything like that. So be really, really good at communicating these things, and of course also like have that discussion with your team. I know we're having it right now, but when you get a team, just remind them that you have work conditions like that.
Yeah, but I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that one day of the week is free. Maybe Wednesdays are okay, nothing, no work on Wednesday. So
But
just make it free.
But on average, you think you can do 20 hours a week?
Yeah, I'm very sure.
Good. And do you have anything coming up? Any holiday plans or anything
I can share it because this is more important to me now. I need it to,
Okay. But I think it's okay. So let's do it like this: that right now you just give us the estimation how much you think, and then afterwards we try to do a round on Slack where you just have time to go through your calendar and kind of like have a schedule for everything. So.
Really? Exams I may likely take is an English exam because of some programs I've applied for.
Cool.
But I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet.
Cool. Diane?
Around 20 hours.
Around 20 hours.
But maybe I'm going to Norway in 10 days.
Okay.
I'm taking I'm there like 6 days.
Okay, so in 10 days and then 6 days.
Yeah.
Cool.
I guess can work 10 to 20 hours. And for next month, maybe I can work more. And I have vacation from the 26th to the 3rd of August.
Okay, cool. Let's just catch up on the dates on Slack. But I mean, yeah, I don't know if you got it written down, it's fine. But
10 to 20 hours?
Yeah, 10 to 20 hours. Like every day at least 2 hours.
Okay, cool. I think actually what we should be doing is kind of like a little spreadsheet where we can see when people are taking vacation and stuff like that. But let's manage that on.
There is one
Slack.
general 2 weeks break in Arc Future. I saw something like that.
Yeah, we're taking vacation. Yeah,
in
yeah,
July.
yeah. I think it's like after the next session, but I'm not sure. I'm really bad.
I think there is.
If I have to manage dates in my mind, they always get mangled up. And like, so don't ask me about dates.
Let me confirm.
Yeah, so that's also why I'm saying let's just follow up with this on Slack afterwards, because then we have it written and so yeah.
Yeah, I can work 30 to 40 hours.
And any plans during the summer that we need to think about?
Just for my project.
Excellent. Next one?
Yeah, I can do 20 to 25. 6 July until 21 July, I'm in vacation going out.
Okay.
So I don't know in those weeks how much I can do, but I will try to work on it, but not 20 hours in that.
Cool.
You said 40 hours? 35 to 40?
37, yeah, 30 to 40. You can range 35 to 40.
Okay, 8th and 15th of July. 8th and 15th of July is for Hack the Future.
Oh, that's the holiday?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
8th and 15th of July.
Those 2 days are off.
Yeah.
8th and 15th of July. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. So I think it's 2 sessions we have 2 more sessions, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Yeah. And I mean, like, as I just told you, I won't be here next time. I'll try to attend as many sessions as possible, but I already did a teaching streak of I don't know how long, so I'm going to take some Sundays off just to have a little bit of a regular life as well. But I think we should be enough mentors to fill in. Cool. So that was the commitment round. Let's get on with. So the plan was to first turn all of these project requirements into user stories, but I feel like that's a lot to do right now. Now we're like a little bit tight in terms of time, so I think I'm just going to read out this stuff because this is it's basically Christopher attempting to make user stories, and then he realized that user stories was pretty hard to do, so he got a little bit lazy along the way. But some of it is a little bit like user stories, and some of it is not so much. But I think we'll go home and then turn this into proper user stories. But now we'll just get the stuff that we got from Christopher, so you have some more information about what is the project about. Okay? Maybe I should not be the one reading it out. So, do you want?
I can read it out. Yes.
Make sure it's loud enough that it's picked up by the microphone.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read it before either, so this is going to be the first time for me. As a user, I can search the archive and find music titles. I want to use the music titles for scientific research on African music, for art projects or personal recreational use. Full music titles are not available on the site, so they can't be scraped from it. There are only snippets available. If I want to obtain a full music title, I need to send a request to the AMA. When I search for West Africa, Ghana, 1980, I get to a page that shows the artists pertaining to this era, and album covers are visible. I can click on the album if I'm interested in. It will take me to a page with more information about the album and a snippet.
And there's more.
There's more. If I want to acquire the full title, I can click on a request button that will take me to a contact form. Categories: vinyl, cassette, shellac, VHS. Subcategories are country, year, genre, artist name. Are related artists with similar categories possible, or a possibility? possible extension is to have a map of Africa where hovering over particular countries allows you to get information about music in that country.
Okay. So the last parts, of course, are not. That's just some wild ideas. It's not the stuff we need to think about. That's the first things. Although it's always fun to create maps, right? So it's like just very briefly, but we're interested in how much are you picking up right now. So maybe Solomon, can you just like explain to me as if I didn't knew nothing about this project? Can you try to describe the project as good as you can?
Yeah, I think we are looking at something that is kind of similar to YouTube.
Okay.
Somehow, where you can maybe type a name and normally in YouTube when you search for a particular music or video to generate some suggestions or maybe some likelihood of what you are searching for. So can give you maybe suggestion, or you can put in a full title and click the search button and it will look through what you are searching for. Present to you whatever is in the archive or database.
It's interesting because so something that I didn't really pick out before. You mentioned videos, and he actually typed VHS there. So there's something there. I only thought it was like music files, but maybe we actually have to be able to upload videos as well. I'm not sure about that. That's maybe something we need to research. But otherwise, it sounds like what I understood from this as well.
I think it is like this app is like a niche app. It is not a general app. That means it's like narrowed down to only African music or maybe artists from African origin.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah. Any additions? Something that Solomon didn't pick up that you made note of?
I think it's like more similar to Spotify.
Yeah, I think Spotify would be my first idea as well.
Yeah.
But then remember, we don't actually have full length tracks, right?
Yeah.
We only have like a teaser of 19 seconds. And then there's like this flow where you have to send them an email in order to get the full track. So that's something that's a little different as well.
I have a question. Do we have like from this? Okay, I also get the Spotify part, where then it also talks about scientific research, and I'm thinking if I don't know anything about research on African music. So what am I mostly interested in if I'm a researcher? Like, what is my approach going to be? Like, how am I going to? I understand from here what they want to show in the app, and I have something I imagine like what I want it to look like. But as a researcher, what's the most important to me? Like, what's the flow I'm gonna be most liking?
I think I think we already have that there. Maybe the name of the artist, a little biodata of the artist, and the genre of music, whether it is reggae, pop, stuff like that, and probably the culture of people that appreciate such type of music. Because from what I know, if you hear beats from Southern Africa, you can easily speculate that this music could probably be from South Africa. If you also hear music, maybe that's from Uganda also, the beats. Nigeria also, I think Nigeria should be more popular, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you hear them, if you are used to such, you can easily tell where they are coming from.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that is what, maybe when you talk about research, you try to know the origin of the music, probably the culture behind it.
But if you see here at the categories, there is something about like country, and there's also the year and the genre. So there's definitely quite a bit of metadata, right? You know what metadata is, right? So it's describing the tracks. So that could be like country, year, genre. I think there are some other things mentioned. Of course, like it's also like that's maybe the stuff that the scientists need. That's like what kind of format was it on, because they need to maybe go and find it in the library. And there, I think there's also like an identifying number telling where it is in the library.
I think what my question was trying to get at is if we ignore the things in brackets underneath, it seems like a database you use to look up stuff. So like, if I'm just thinking, if I'm a researcher, am I like, where do I get my information from? Because I don't like go into this database and look up things as the first thing. Probably I'm thinking more like, do I have some cultural needs somewhere else, and then I go look here. But then we see the last things here where they talk about, okay, there's something about a map, and there's also something about similarity. So then it kind of hints at, is it like a discovery process? Like, do I then, as a researcher, sit down with this database as the first thing, and then I start my research here, or then I start my research somewhere else?
Right. But I'm not really clear about whether this is a product for like kind of like personal enjoyment, like just like discovering African music, or it is more of a tool for researchers.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's maybe something we need to push back on and try to ask our client about, which is more important.
That's also what I hear Darren and Solomon say. Like, Solomon sounds like discovering, while Darren is saying more something that sounds like lookup.
Yeah.
So it's more like a lookup because the music is already there.
Yeah. Okay.
And we just need to provide a platform where maybe a reciter can come and find.
Yeah, they give us. They have already the database and put it aside. So
okay,
we just need to get the data.
We are going to work more with that front end.
Okay.
He, for example, he said that they built the database for that.
Well, yeah, so that's another thing. I think that's not even included here. So, as far as I know, they have everything in an Excel file. So you'll receive maybe an Excel file, but I think Rasmus, the guy who approached them about the project, I think he's already been doing some crazy magic in Python or something like that to pull that out into another data format. So I don't know if that is. Oh, I think there was some discussion about like data formats, but we will get all the data in some sort of format, and we have to kind of be ready to do something with that format. And I actually have like a research task related to that, where one of you has to take an Excel file and try to turn that into an API. But we'll discuss that in a minute. Something that I make note of when I see this is I kind of like try to map this to things that I already know. And when I looked at this, I was kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit like Spotify, but actually it's kind of, to me, it's more like a web shop actually. So there's the same thing about like a category for finding different products. So there's a lot of different categories that you can base your search on, and then you get a product, and then you can preview that product with the preview button. And if you so choose, you need the full track, you can send them an email and request the full track. So it could also maybe be compared with iTunes Store. Maybe that's pretty close. You have the preview there, right? And then you have to buy it if you want to. That's another comparison you could make, because it's always like helpful to have some ideas of existing products that might do something similar in order to have an idea what it is you're building. But of course, we don't want to just make a copy of iTunes, but just to get some ideas about and then of course, like this flow about like requesting a full track, he's just suggesting that's an email contact form. And in a way I kind of like that, because that's probably something you're going to be asked to implement in a fairly near future as a junior web developer. That's something you have to build all the time. And unfortunately, it's not incredibly difficult. But maybe, I mean, like, that's something that you could dive further into if we realize that this is not such a big project and we can do more than that. Then maybe we can think about, could we do that in a smarter way? So maybe like implementing login and being able to download the tracks directly if you have certain rights or something like that. But that's like not within the scope of the project at the moment. At the moment, you just need to think about like being able to send an email and request a track. So what else is there to dive into? Yeah, how do you feel generally? Do you feel like you have an idea what we're building? Do you feel like you could sit down and build this, or or do you need to know something? You probably do need to know something. So what do we need to know more about? Okay, let's do the post-it thing again. So 5 minutes, 3 post-its. You know the drill. So what I need you to think about is 3 questions that we can pose to the client, right? Be really, really critical. Okay? And please use 3 different post-its.
3 questions to pose to the client.
Yeah. So what do we need to know more about?
I'm gonna skip this one.
Okay.
Zach, can you please say again what is that you should write about?
So 3 questions for the client, the people we're building this for, to clarify the product. So of course, if you have absolutely no questions, you can't do it. But if you feel like you know the product, then try to think a little deeper and think about like, okay, so if I start building this, what might there be that I don't know at the moment? So imagine you start building and it'd be like, okay, so I don't know how to this, or there's something here that's not clear, or something like that, because this is not a very detailed description of the product at the moment.
Yeah.
You can do this, for example.
idea. So are we close to being ready? Let's just go on. So Isaac?
So I couldn't think of any, but
Really?
I was like, if maybe our client would like to provide access for a user to upload
Oh.
a file which is not available. I say I have a file and I want to add it.
That's a really good question. That's a very good question. I didn't think of that. So whether there's any kind of user-generated content uploads, yeah. We're not going to like do the mapping and all that stuff. We're just going to throw it up here, and then we're going to try to post those questions directly to the client. So yeah.
I was thinking whether there will be language restrictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Restrictions? How do you mean?
Maybe because there are some, like where I come from, Nigeria, we don't speak English, and we also have good musicians also. So if there will be, is it restricted to just English? Like
yeah. So you're suggesting having this site so you can translate it?
Probably something like that. Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I like that one.
It will be English or French music or any music at all.
Cool. Good question.
Yeah. Then I also have, because like there are some apps whereby after downloading, it will be in the archive online, not in your phone or laptop. Right now, also access such.
What do you mean? Whether you can download content?
Maybe after you purchase, whether is it going to be on your phone or on the laptop or maybe from an online account.
Yeah.
Whether the music can play offline or when you are just online.
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah,
so are you asking if you can use it on a mobile phone or
when you are offline? Whether you are offline, if you can.
Whether you can use it offline, so you can. Okay, now I understand. So if you're not online, you can mark this track, this track, this track, and then you can go on your phone and you can listen to it even though you're not online.
Yeah, that's the question. Yes.
Playlist. That's a good question. I'm pretty sure we're not going to make an offline app, but it's still a good question. So, cool. Yeah.
And what content can you share? Is that too far? Is it too advanced?
All questions are welcome.
Okay. But you can also share the content. Or you can share content. Or
yeah. Okay. So when you mean you share content, do you mean like
generate a link
to that page where you can listen to this music?
Yeah, to a friend, or maybe you recommend.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's something I thought about with like user-generated content. I called it like that, but you just said uploading tracks. But I instantly think about user-generated content, and that might also be people commenting on music. So that's also something to think about. Did anyone have a post-it about comments on music? No. Okay, so I'll just make one because I think that's worth taking up. I think I'm out of post-its. Do anyone have an extra? So, Mads?
I also have a couple. I don't know if they qualify. First of all, what is an AMA?
Yeah.
Is that the person who maintains the database or what? Because also when you talk about user-generated content, I'm thinking user is pretty generic. Does user also mean the person who maintains the database? Like the archive is maintained, right? So
yeah.
By the
way, do you have an idea what AMA is short for? Because I also thought about that one. It was just Christopher who gave the link, the text.
Okay.
So
okay.
I haven't written it.
Okay.
But it could be like archive manager or I don't know really.
Yeah, okay.
But I suppose it is something like that. It's a role like that. It's someone taking care of the archive, I suppose. Okay. That's my guess based on the text there. But it's definitely something we need to make sure we know for sure. Cool.
Then I think the whole kind of continuing on what I said before with like, so the user story, how how the research is going to use this, because right now it seems very broad that it both has the like the scientific thing in there, but it also has the recreational thing.
Yeah, sure.
And that sounds like two very different things to me, or like at least in my mind. That's like also what Darren someone said. In my mind it was like, okay, that's two different applications. And then the last thing is like, how do you then filter down and discover? Like, is it always a hierarchy, or is it like, can some things be like multiple places at once and that kind of stuff? So that's my question.
Oh, so if you have something that is from Nigeria, which is both jazz and Afrobeat or something like that.
Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you have categories where you can have something that is two things, could it be from both Nigeria and Somalia?
Yeah.
If you have one artist from one country working together with another one from another country, for instance. So there are some things there. That's really interesting to dive into. Cool. Let's get the posts and also some of those posts. Cool. Diane, what do you have?
Well, I have just Google Analytics. Maybe you can use it so those who we built the app for, so they can see is there anyone viewing the page and which kind of music they mostly hear. And,
okay. Yeah. So right now we're asking about the requirements for the application. So what we want to ask is for the client, do you need us to enable something like Google Analytics so you can see who are using it, right?
Yeah, I just write it because I thought it would be helpful.
But I agree, and that's something we can ask the client. Do you need something like Google Analytics? Will that be helpful for you to
so this is
for this part? That's a good question. Okay, that was the only one, or?
Yeah.
What do you have?
I may ask like what categories you would like to have for the music, if I understand correctly. Yeah, and then for the user, but the user would like to keep the information of the users for the database. Like for example, the user they click for example this kind of epic music post would like to get the information so they know the users like which kind of music best.
Okay, I didn't really understand our question. Try to rephrase it.
This and the users is for regional music or for scientific. I mean, this is different things you talk about. Like before, maybe it's for research or maybe it's just for open like Spotify shops. So if it's for Spotify shops, then it's maybe important if we can like use Google Analytics to keep the information of users click which kind of music most. So our client can know.
Okay, so we can make like top charts. What is listened to the most? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Like a recommendation.
Okay, so recommendation, that's actually involving that we can see what the individual user is listening to, and then recommend things based on that.
Like
Okay.
AI is bad, it will not finish it.
But that's pretty complicated. But that's really interesting. So there's some ideas about like personalization. That's like tailoring the results, saying, oh, so usually you like this kind of music, so maybe you like this one as well.
Yeah, but or maybe it's history about the user.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a two.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. What do you have?
I would ask the client about the user management system, something like login or you can manage the states of the users.
Yeah, of course. That's a really good one.
And of
Not the last.
And also, I will ask about users can talk with each other and they can follow each other. If one user visit one track, the other users can see that how many tracks have been listed before. Track history, something like that.
Alright, cool.
So these two.
Cool. Cool. So Isaac? No, sorry, Ishmael.
I have here like time of the artist, how long he's been in this artist.
Time? What do you mean? How long? What?
Like how long he's playing actually the music, like.
So the length of the track, or
length of his the way of playing
Career.
like, his career from the beginning.
how long has he been active as an artist?
Yeah. And
Right.
and also possibility of download his music if you can.
Yeah, I think we can maybe, if you have more questions, but right now the idea is that we you can have here 19 seconds of the track, and then you have to send them an email, and then they can send you the full track. Gotta love auto updates, especially on video. Cool. But I mean, if you have some additional questions to that.
Yeah, but it's like downloading. I don't see like iCloud and the rest doesn't have that much. But if you wanna download, for sure it requires for you to sign up and many things. But yeah, this option come up.
Yeah, I think what's just before I forget, maybe can we put something like a count, number of downloads?
Yeah, so she actually mentioned that, like having statistics based on how many times something is listened to.
Actually, I have here also rate the product depending on the review. So like how much review this.
Reviewing products, yeah, absolutely, yeah, sure.
And then small description about the artist.
Small description about the artist. Okay, so having some history about him.
Yeah.
Cool. Good questions. Nice. Excellent. A lot of really, really good questions that I did not think about. So we'll take these questions and we'll try to take them to our clients, and we'll just shoot them down, and they have to be. They'll be busy responding to this, and we'll probably get even more. And I mean, like, if you realize there's something that we haven't asked about here, post in the channel. And I think also we're going to include the guys from the university in the channel. I'm not sure, they're already in the the mentor channel, but maybe we'll include them in the student channel as well.
They are in the African Music Project.
Yeah, so maybe we'll include them in Class04 as well, but we'll find out if that's the right thing to do. But good questions, nice, good. We took a little time for that. Now I think it's the time to try to give you some individual projects, and that's something that's completely new that we haven't been doing before for the final projects. And to be honest, the reason why we do it is because we kind of had the experience that we set the teams, and then in all of the teams there was like one guy doing all the work, and then there was someone kind of like trailing along. And then we realized, okay, so what if we start out the project with having everyone contribute something? That was like the motivating idea for this. So just to make sure that everyone can use Git and everyone knows how to contribute according to our guidelines, we just made a working agreement where we agreed that everyone needs to do pull requests for everything. So that was like the motivation for doing this, like with individual. But then we realized for this project there's a lot of unknowns, because it's like it's a little bigger than we're used to, and there's like there are also a lot of opportunities to go and try out some new stuff. So when we got together as mentors and we like brainstormed of this, we realized that there were a lot of things we wanted to try out. So what we decided to do is that each of you will have some sort of assignment where you have to go home and research something, and you have to provide an output. There has to be an output of doing that. And the first part of that output would always be to, and I think I have a slide to support this. So here, the purpose of doing this is, of course, to delegate the actual research, figuring out what are we doing, why are we doing it, and try to delegate the work so we can cover more ground, right? Then we want to make sure that we're starting the project running rather than crawling. So by having all of you having written a little bit of code in the first week, that means hopefully we won't have to wait until like 3 weeks in before people really start contributing. Then there's this idea of having one student being a champion of something. So one student is going to do some research early on, and then the other students can come to that person with questions about the stuff that they did research on. And then of course there's this thing that everyone demonstrate that they are able to contribute. So they demonstrate that you can make a pull request and you can do some code. And it's not because it's so important whether this is complicated or simple code. It will vary quite a lot with the different tasks that we give you. Some of the tasks are a lot easier than some of the other tasks. It's not really fair in that sense. But that's kind of reality in a workplace as well. But the outcome of all of this is we expect you to write something in like a written language about what you learned, what you were considering when you were studying these things, so the other students can read that and kind of get up to scratch. But it's probably be whoever of you is writing it will still be kind of the champion because you were the one to like discover it. But it should of course be transparent and open for everyone to be able to go and read about what are your thoughts about these things. And then we expect you to build some sort of prototype, and that has to be committed to GitHub. And we expect to see a pull request at the latest next Saturday at 12 a.m. That's 12 in the day, right? So us mentors have a chance to see it before the class. And at that time, you should already have at least one review from another student. So you have to find another student and say, hey, you're reviewing my code. I want to make sure that I will finish my code on Friday evening. Will you have time to review it at Saturday before 12? And maybe he'll say, I'm really busy at Friday evening. Could you finish it in the morning instead or something like that? And then you have to figure out how to plan for that. Okay? So these are the reasons why we're doing it, and this is what we expect to see. So we expect to see some documentation. And that will probably just be a README file where you write some words about what you found, and then a prototype which goes probably in the same folder where you just demonstrate how you can use this thing that we're going to be doing. So there are some different things that we want to try exposing you to for this project, and right now we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're 6 students, and we actually have 8 different topics. So I'm thinking about.
We are 7.
Huh?
We are 7. 1 is out.
But that was your what, right?
She's seated.
Yeah, but I can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mass is not a student.
No. Sorry.
Maybe he wants to do some research. I don't know. But I was also thinking about maybe we can give something to Jawad. But I'm thinking that maybe number 2 is just about setting up a file structure for the project. We already did that for the previous project. We did that as mentors. And the reason that we want to do that is so everyone puts things in kind of the same places, so it's easier for us to find a way around. I'm thinking maybe I'll take that one out and we'll take care of that as mentors, because that's a little more monkey work than some of the other stuff. And then the question is, I don't know, maybe we should, so it was 6, right? And we have 8. Magdi, I'm thinking probably wait with Zeppelin then we can maybe try to introduce that after.
Which one of them?
Zeppelin.
Oh yeah, okay.
So if we take this one out and Zeppelin, then we have Storybook, Knex, Mongo, JSON server, and reactive search.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That means the stuff that's in here is not easy at all. That will require some work on your hands to go and study what these things are, what they can do, and how to set it up. But I'm pretty sure these things would be really, really valuable for you. So
I just want to add that these things, like I use some of them at work, and I even struggle to understand them at the beginning. So the target here is to understand it. It doesn't have to just sit down. You have to sit down for 8 hours researching, get it done, ask for help, ask a friend, ask me,
ask
Look at
for
it
help sooner rather than later.
So yeah,
and
just doing it, not doing it yourself. Just do it anyway.
I think the only one you didn't know was Next.js, right? We used that for the past project, so I know a little bit about that one. But otherwise, I know about Storybook for sure. I know about Knex. I know a little bit about Mongo, but I haven't been using it professionally. I know about JSON Server. Did you use that before?
Yes, we use it in the class, most of the class.
I haven't been looking into reactive search yet, but I'm looking forward to that. And building a HTML5 audio player prototype is, I think that's something that all of us can advise you about. Okay, have anyone heard about Storybook before?
No.
Yeah.
You heard about it?
It's about the UI design.
Yeah.
You can use it to design your UI, but it's kind of static code, so you cannot really.
Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. I'm not sure if I want to show our work Storybook on the video.
There are some online
good examples?
Not examples. Some companies they provide their internal components
Yeah,
as
of
Storybook
course.
on GitHub.
Yeah, of course.
One of them would be Airbnb.
Is it like InVision?
No, it's not.
In React. So it's how you build React components. You don't have to have.
Oh yeah, this is great. So the idea is that if every time you have to build a new component as a UI component, you kind of have to first figure out what kind of data does it need, and you have to adapt the database and the API and all that stuff in order to build something on top of that. That can easily get really complicated, and you have to make sure that the new version of the API is out before your UI and all this kind of stuff. So Storybook is a tool where you can make a mock. Do you know what a mock is? A mock is when you make something that kind of pretends that it is something. So it's kind of like making a backend that is not really a backend. It's just like maybe a flat file where you can get some sample data. It's not real data. There's not all the business logic going on that there would be in the real API. But there's something that makes it look like you have the stuff that you need. So usually it's just that you have a JSON file with some data in it instead of having an actual database. And I've never tried to use the Airbnb Storybook before, but let's just click around. So you can see this is an example of a button apparently. Hidden with displaying on its date range picker.
Right-click the button.
Oh yeah, that was a good idea. Oh, cool.
So this is basically a tool that uses React. It's 100% React that lets you run components independently from the app. Just you want to test a button, you can test it here.
Exactly.
Then you can use a button and something else, create another component. Then how you can build your whole app without running it, just building the components independently, just sending the data, render it, send data, render it.
So you're only building front end here. You don't need the backend. The backend is just JSON files with some data in it. It's not proper backend. It doesn't do anything. But it's very, very helpful. And as I told you about my suggestion, if you remember the process, my suggestion was to build a static UI, static front end. That's basically what you're doing in Storybook. But you're even you're building it on a component level. So you finish one component, finish it completely. Then you can take the next component and finish that. Of course, you don't have the actual backend running there, but you finish all the stuff. So the component does, if you have some logic in your component, that should work, and that should be in the component already. And then you just get the data from JSON files in Storybook. Oh yeah, and you can get it in different languages, and
do whatever you want to provide it. So provide data, and it's going to render it for you.
So all of this apparently is about that date picker. I think, yeah. So this is different variations on that date picker.
And about the variations, you can, this is one of the very nice things about it. If the component can behave in different ways, you can test different states for the same component.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
All of these are different states, right? So we're testing the same component here, and then we're just giving them different data all the way along down here. You can even set up down here, you can set up something that's called knobs, where you can on the fly, you can change the data. So if you have some text up there, you can like type the new text you want to test if the layout is breaking, if you provide very long text or short text. And you can have like a true, false, like a check mark, so you can make it, this is on a dark background, this is on a light background, or something like that. If you need those things in your component. Of course, you only put those things that you need your component to be able to change. But it looks like Airbnb do it by just creating a new story for every single state that they have, which is actually really interesting. We don't do that. We have a lot of those down there. Maybe it's a little bit of an anti-pattern in terms of this is easier to test, I think. But that's another discussion. So basically, this is Storybook. I think it will be really, really beneficial for us to try to use Storybook in this project, because that means that we can kind of like build some front-end components and finish them up. And if we get to a point where we realize this project is just like way too much that we can deliver it within this class, maybe we can just build a lot of UI components, and then we can hand them off to the next class coming after. And they can actually finish up the product and ship it or something else. But this is just a really nice tool for building the front end isolated from the rest. And you can see Airbnb is using it, you're using it, we're using it. Have you seen it before? No.
I don't know.
Okay. So the next thing is Knex.js. And for whoever end up working with that one, I would recommend looking in the previous final project, the final project Class03, because we were using it there. And you guys have a little bit of experience with it. So this one goes a little bit together with Mongo. So we've been teaching you MySQL.
Yeah.
You've been working a little bit with Mongo, or?
Yeah, I worked with
Okay, yeah. So there are some benefits to Mongo in terms of like it's easier to make it reactive and stuff like that. I don't see it as a really big requirement of this application. It could work just as well in MySQL as in Mongo, but it would be really interesting to just do a little experiment where one guy is trying to build a little bit of a prototype in MySQL, and another one is doing it in Mongo. And we have some requirements here just in general when we're building the database, because we need two things that I'm not sure you heard about before. Do you know what a seed file is? To seed your database? You've seen it before? Okay. And you two guys have seen it from the past class, right? So, you know, a seed, that's like the thing you put in the ground and then a plant grows, right? So it's something that you put in your database to get started, right? So it's like starting data. That's basically what it is. So it's just taking some data and having some data that makes sure your application can run when you started the first time. And we need to have a solution where it's really easy to have some seed data in our application, so people don't have to sit and write all the MySQL tables that they need to get started, and so people don't have to fill in some sample data on the first one. It should be really easy. Whenever one of you have been building database, then the other people who are working in the team, they should just be able to run a script, and then the database is set up and ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I add something? I didn't work with MySQL, but I know what I don't know what is a seed file is, but it's the concept of this. So if you didn't find a seed file, just don't feel confused. We need to find a way to just populate the data. So
Yeah.
MongoDB we're using something called dump.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a
So
seed file.
maybe a different terminology in Mongo.
Exactly. So it doesn't have to be a seed file in MongoDB, just a way to start a database with some data. And in MongoDB it's called dump. In MongoDB there's Mongoose and Mongoose migration. So you just look for a solution to the problem. You don't look for the exact terminology. You just want to get it done. That's the target.
Cool. Yeah. So that, and you already mentioned the other part of it. So we need some way to populate the database. I'm calling it seeding, and it could be called dumping.
And in MongoDB, just
yes.
Seed
So
connects.
Yeah, in Knex it's called seed. But the other part of this is migrations, and that's fortunately called the same. Anyone have an idea what a migration is?
Migration table in Knex. We get it.
Yeah, you work with migration and Knex.
Yeah.
Can you explain briefly what it is?
As a concept, not in.
Also like concept, but you have to like migration is tables that you are bringing or importing from the database. So that will be the name kind migration, but I don't work it that much.
Okay, so that's correct, but I want you to just put some more details on it. So a migration represents a change in your database. So if you change a database table, maybe you add another field to a database table, then it's really, because if you do that, then you probably also change some code in your application, because now it's using that field, right? Then it's really annoying that the other person in the group kind of like pulls the latest changes from GitHub and gets that code, and then suddenly nothing works because his database does not have that field, right? That's a problem that we want to solve. So a migration is a file that you put in your project on GitHub where it tells your project how to change the database in order to stay up to date with the latest changes that have been made. So it's just a file that tells, in this case, go in this table, add another field. And you typically do it in the way that you write an up migration and you write a down migration. So when you write the up migration, you say go to this table, add this field. When you write a down migration, you say go to this table, remove this field. Because that means if someone runs the up migration, then they have the field, but then maybe in GitHub they might want to revert back to before the field was there. Then they need to run the down migration so they can change the database back to what it looked like before that. So that's why you want to have an up migration and a down migration. It's kind of like if you have an application and you have the undo and then you have redo, right? That's a little bit the idea about migration, and that's what makes it so clever, because it means you can kind of like undo your database changes. And if you have a database running on a real production environment, if you have real users using your database, and you have real data in your database, this is really crucial, because it means that you can make changes to your database while it's basically running with users and all that, because otherwise you basically need to shut down your entire system and then make all the changes across MySQL and make sure that everything works, and then take the entire database and then copy it over the database that's up there on the server. And I mean, like, if you didn't stop, you have to basically take down the website, because otherwise users might be using the website and saving new data that you don't have in your local copy. That's just never going to work, right? You can't take a production website down for several hours while you're updating the database, right? So what we do here is we just make a script. And that script, we test that locally and make sure that we can run all the changes on the database. And when we've tested it well enough, we can run that script remotely on the real server where we have like production code running and all that. And because it's like a script, it goes really fast. It just changes, bang. So from one moment, the database looked like this, and then the next moment it's updated. And the users won't even notice. Hopefully they won't notice. They can, of course, if it's like a really big database, there can be some complications. But that's not something you need to worry about. Migrations is a really great thing. It's something you need for the reason once you have to have a production website, it's just like the way you do it. Second, when you're working together in a team, it's really important that the database does not get in the way of you collaborating, because I've seen so many times that people are working together and they have like one computer and two computers, and they have things on GitHub, and then they pull the code down and one of them, oh, it doesn't work. And that's because the database is out of sync, right? And then it's just like, he stops working and he goes and they start like maybe working together on the other computer, so both are like programming on the same computer, which is good for like the pair programming is a good thing, but like it's not effective in the long run. Of course, we need to have the first computer working again, right? So that's what, in that situation, if they've been doing it the right way, then the code changes that requires a database change. So imagine that you are calling a field in the database in your code. If you do that, and that field is a new field, then that pull request must also have a migration where you add that field. So that means that the other guy, he does a git pull, and then maybe it makes a error that there's something with the database, and then he just needs to run his migrations, and then it fixes that for him. So that's the only thing he needs to do. He doesn't have to go in and manually create fields in the database, which can be really confusing. So that's why it's really important. We need to be able to do migrations, and we need to be able to do seeding or populating the database in the beginning. So you can easily test out things on different computers. You can always test it on a new computer and have it up and running in a very short amount of time. And we need one guy to figure out how to do this in Knex. And we already have some examples of how to do that in the past project. And I mean, like, we'll have to do some more instructions for you individually when you have these projects between you and one of the mentors. We'll give you more instructions so you can get started, because right now we didn't prepare all of it. So we need to have one do it in Knex, and we need to have another one doing it in Mongo. And it sounds like you need Mongoose and...
I haven't used Mongoose,
okay,
but I guess
whatever.
But should be easier.
Yeah, okay, but that's something you'd sort out together. Then there's one task here, which is kind of like, the idea is that just to have us running really quickly, we can try to use a JSON server. So all this stuff, it might take a while before we have like a proper running database. We have to figure out the data model, all kind of things, right? But a way to just have a API running really quickly is that we can take the actual data from the Excel file, and then we can try to turn that into JSON. You might have to write a script for that. You can export from Excel. I don't think you can export to JSON, but you can export to comma separated values, CSV. And then you can translate that to JSON. It shouldn't be too hard. But this task is about trying to take some real data from our customer, try to turn that into JSON, and then try to host it on JSON server. And JSON server, I don't know, did you use it before?
No.
Okay, you used it for some of the previous classes, right? Yeah. So it just takes the JSON file and turns it into an API. So that's just to have something so you can try it out and try to make some UI components that actually cause a real JSON thing. And the cool thing is that those JSON files, they might actually end up in your storybook, because that's also based on JSON, but without actually calling the JSON server. Then there's a task about doing some research on reactive search. And reactive search is a library that makes it really, really easy to work with the Elasticsearch. Did any of you hear about Elasticsearch? Okay, so it's a product that enables full text search of content in general. So you can easily search through full text, and you can get like fuzzy search. So if you search for part of a word, it will match probably, and it can do all those really tricky things with search, because search can be really difficult to implement. And Elasticsearch gives a really, really nice solution for that. There might be some challenges to setting it up probably, but you have some experience with this, so you're there to help out. I haven't tried it before, but as I told, I'm looking forward to trying this out. But the cool thing about reactive search is it's actually React components that are already built to talk together with Elasticsearch. So as I understand it, you get like filter components, right?
Yeah, so
search and filter and maybe autocomplete or something, or...
Yeah. So the Elasticsearch is the search engine itself, is the backend, and I don't think it makes sense now to create the backend for it, but if I work on it and provide the backend for you, then you could use reactive search to point to the server and create all the cool stuff, all the data search with drop-downs to autocomplete and filter by date and sort by items. And with reactive search, it just comes out of the box. So we need just to create the schema correctly when send the data to Elasticsearch. And I'm going to take care of that in the beginning. So you can just build a really, really cool front end with reactive search, which uses React. And yeah, everything that you know, but just get something done really quickly with reactive search. And then we can get into the back end of Elasticsearch in the future.
And then the final one is to try to look into the HTML5 audio player. That's probably the easiest task on the board right now. But HTML5 has like an audio player built-in that we can use, and it's just a matter of, first of all, testing it with some audio files, figuring out how it works, and then maybe figuring out how can it be customized, can we style it in a specific way so it looks better, can we, what kind of events are there associated with this player, so maybe an event when the audio file has finished, saying maybe like you listen to 19 seconds and then like the button to send a request for the full track pops up or something like that. We don't know what we need right now, so this is just a research task. It's figuring out what can you do, then try to think about like, can I do some cool stuff with this? Just try to make a prototype of something that might be useful. But all of this is like, it's research tasks. It's pretty open-ended, and it's time boxed in the sense that, as I told you, we want to see this on Saturday, and it's like, put as much effort into this as you can, and then show us something on Saturday. It might not be as much as you expected. It might just be like a tiny little bit of something that does something. We want to see something. So try to plan it so you can show us something on next Saturday, and maybe the research work that needs to be done was like this, and you only managed to do this much. But then you come on next Sunday and you say, okay, so I managed to do this much. That was what I was able to do. And I found out this and this and that. And then we figure out, do we need to do more research into this? Maybe based on just this little snippet, we can figure out, okay, we cannot work with this. This technology is not the right one for us. Or maybe we can figure out, okay, this might work, but we need some more knowledge about this. Then we just do another research spike, so we time box that as well. So probably, again, a week or something like that. And then whoever has that research, maybe it should be someone else this time, comes back and try to spread the knowledge with the rest of the group. And we try to make a decision if it's something that's worth using. So, I'm not really sure how to assign those different tasks that we have here.
I have some experience with the audio and a bit MongoDB. Maybe I can work with Next.js and MongoDB, so they can.
Okay, so this is actually two different tasks, but if you think you can look at both of them, because we do have like, then there's the, but I think this one is good that we mentors take care of that one. And I think the Zeppelin thing, it kind of requires to make a design for you. So I think it's alright if we introduce that a little bit later. But I'm thinking it would be nice if you take the Mongo one for sure. And then maybe one of you guys from the past class could do the Next.js. How about that? You want to do the Next? Yeah. Okay. Daniel, are you writing down who's doing one? Cool. Who wants to look at Storybook? Maybe you, if you have some knowledge about it?
Yeah,
okay, cool. So what do we have left? We have JSON server and we have reactive search.
Reactive search, I would like to.
Yeah? I think that one is pretty difficult.
Yeah, I'd like to because I'm learning React all over again, so I would like to.
Yeah, I think it has more to do with Elasticsearch actually than React. At least like trying to learn about that. So I'm not sure. I don't know what your background is, but it sounds like maybe a little more experience.
Okay, I'll take 7.
Yeah, I can.
Huh?
I'll take number 7.
Oh yeah, that's open still. Yeah, you still need a task, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
5 or 7.
Will it be okay for you to do the reactive search?
Yes.
Okay. And then the two of you, so
5
who's?
or 7?
You want 7? Okay.
Maybe I'll go with create a mock guy with JSON server.
Okay, so now you're going to fight over it. Can you real quick just decide who is doing which one?
Any of them. Take 5.
You take 5. Yeah. So that was the mock API, and then you take the audio player.
Yeah, but I will still take a look at that number 6 because I think then I will take the 7. But if I have time, I will try and still look at
Absolutely. I mean, if any of you are curious about some of the other stuff, please go and look at it.
I want
But
to know about MongoDB actually.
yeah,
Work on it
sure,
also.
sure. But the cool thing is that Darian is going to come back, and he's going to do a little nice README file on GitHub, right? Telling what you found out about MongoDB. Why is it better than MySQL? Why is it worse? How about this migrations and seeding, populating? How does that work? Is that something you have to look out for? And that's open for everyone to try to read. And then it's maybe, I think it's a really good idea. Focus on the research task you have right now, right? For this week, because remember it's time boxed, so it's a matter of learning as much as you can within that week, right? And then you make a little write-up in the README file where you tell the others what you found out, and you do a little prototype. And get the prototype started really soon, because that's usually where you will struggle the most, right? So get that started right away, and then do some writing along the way. What did I discover now? And maybe like try to document your process. First I tried this, that didn't work, then I tried this. You can do it in many different ways. But then the cool thing is, after a week, each of you come back with some new knowledge, and then if someone else is like, oh, that's really cool, this Mongo, I really want to learn some more about that, then you have a good starting point, because then you can go and read the README file that you did, and kind of like have a head start in terms of like trying out some things, and maybe use the prototype as well, build on top of the prototype, yeah.
So the idea is create a project on GitHub for the work?
Well, I will be creating a one repository with, what is it now, 5? Is it 5 prototypes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different prototypes. So I'll create a repository with 6 folders. I will put 6 empty README files in each folder, and then you have to fill out the README file, and you have to put in some sort of prototype in there, and maybe we'll give you some guidelines, maybe in the README file. I'm not sure about that, but we'll figure that out on Slack, and you'll probably have to grab hold of one of us mentors and get some help getting started. We'll post out that repository later tonight, and then it will be your own responsibility to try to reach out to us and figure out how to get started. Okay? What do you think about this?
Mm-hmm. So you connect that to your GitHub repository, so we can pull the.
Sorry?
So we can pull the README file, so we can change it or something.
Yeah. So you clone the GitHub repository and make all the changes, including changes to the README file in the repository, and then of course you need to submit all of this as a pull request. Of course. And that pull request has to be reviewed by one of the other students. Next Saturday, you have to find someone to review it, right? So if there's someone in here who is like particularly interested in something, that's a really good opportunity to use that person as a review person. Yeah, so next Saturday at 12 a.m., we want to see 6 pull requests to that repository, each with some research. And I mean, if you don't get as far as you were hoping to, just make sure that the stuff that you did learn, that you try to put that in a prototype somehow, and the stuff that you did learn, try to put that in a README file, and then push that out. There's no one coming after you because you didn't do enough, at least unless you didn't do anything at all. But one thing to remember here is that now you're actually being responsible for the entire class, because the entire class is relying on you coming back with something. And it's of course fair if you don't come back with as much as you were hoping for, but please try to put in quite a bit of work. And I mean, like, most of you are talking about putting in 20 to 40 hours of work. Please do that already this week. If you do that, we can get really far with a lot of this. Admittedly, I think some of them, I don't hope will take 20 or 40 hours, but some of them could easily take that amount of work, and possibly even more. I think you could use 40 hours on each of these, actually. Depends how much effort you put into it. You could put a lot of effort into making a crazy audio player. It would probably be overkill for what we're doing, but you could if you wanted to. So
and if you finish something early, maybe join another one with something else.
Yeah, of course.
So moving forward.
Sure. Cool. I think that was today's
And
session.
what would be the appropriate time to maybe contact any of the mentors? What would be the appropriate time? Because from what I've experienced, at times you ask questions to take up to like a day before you get a response.
But I mean, I guess
Maybe
we
if
all
you guys
work
can-
like regular
Yeah.
work hours, but we also, a lot of us do a lot of stuff at all kind of times of the day. So the right time to ask questions is when you have that question, and then we get back to you as soon as we can. But remember again, post in the channel, so whoever comes there first can respond.
And I want to add something that some of you would take too much time figuring out a solution for a problem, and that's a good thing that you try to find a solution. But after a certain threshold, you should stop and ask for help.
Yeah,
it's good that you have the commitment, but again, we want to move forward. So sometimes, like after, if it's a small problem, give it half an hour. More than that, stop, take a break, ask someone, discuss it with someone, but don't spend too much time with the same problem.
Yeah, so there's always that guy or girl, for that sake, who kind of like haven't even read the question before they start asking questions, right? That's a little bit annoying for us. Like, I mean, at least make sure you read the question and try to understand it first, right? But then on the other hand, there's always also that guy or girl who sits there for the entire time and just looks at it and being like, oh, I don't know what I'm seeing, and just gets stuck and doesn't know how to get out of that and doesn't ask questions. So the balance is somewhere in between, right? And I'd say rather be annoying and ask questions too soon than too late. That's like the main rule, and we'll probably tell you if you're being really, really annoying. But
I think what you said is right. So most of the times you might be maybe messing up something small. You are missing a full stop.
Yeah.
You are making a case, something like that, and you spend the whole day. It has happened.
But if you spend a whole day doing that,
It has
like
happened.
missing out because of you
Yeah.
missed a full stop or something like that, in that case, it's a really good idea to
That's
ask one of
right,
us,
that's right.
because it will probably take us 10 seconds to
help you move
to
forward.
figure out that was what you missed, and then you can spend the rest of the day working on something productive, right?
That's why he's saying that you
Yeah.
shouldn't waste a lot of time. You
Yeah.
can be missing out on something
Yeah.
very small. So,
And sometimes it's confusing. So if you work with MongoDB, you don't understand what it is, the concept, and you just want to need like a quick start or just something to get you going, something to move you forward, then that's totally viable that we just have a quick phone call, okay, this is it, 5 minutes, and then you have enough knowledge, enough input to get started again. Need some motivation, just a little bit confused, just don't stop for too long, always have a call, and you can always either a Slack or a phone call.
You what?
Yeah.
Do you want to do something during the week?
Sure.
Do you want to do a prototype on Zeppelin?
I've never used Zeppelin, and but I can try. I actually have one other project which I wanted to discuss with you that I'm working on. But yeah, I can make time for it.
Let's talk about that later.
Okay.
That would be really cool if you can contribute a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Sure, cool.
You guys excited? I'm excited.
I'm excited.
True. Excited and nervous too.
Yeah, I can understand. It's always scary in the beginning, but and I mean, there's. We keep telling you there are no stupid questions. Right now, I just told you you're gonna ask the question too soon, of course. But I mean, also a lot of times in the beginning, it can be really difficult to just like read through everything and understand it and things like that. Exactly because you are being a little nervous about like what it is it I'm building and things like that. So it can be difficult to focus. So sometimes it's just like a matter of saying, oh, what was it I had to do again? I didn't really understand it, and then we try to explain it again, and then maybe it clicks, and then you can actually overcome that and get along. So cool. And we recorded the entire session, which was just like talk and talk and talk and talk. So it would probably be incredibly boring to listen to. But we of course make sure to make it available, given that nothing went wrong with the recording or anything like it sometimes does. But we'll see. But I'll stop the recording now and say thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was that?